This story will be about a guy named Esha Fan Liao. He was considered the strongest warrior of humanity. Up to one moment, after winning the last demon, he had to marry his beloved, a long-haired blonde with blue, his eyes in love with him. But it turned out that at one point, he lost absolutely everything. So how did everything come up, and what will be the story in general? At some point, the boy reborn with a demon. And it did not give him rest. He just was obliged to return and marry his girlfriend. He even had such an opportunity. He could die again and reborn back into a person. True suicide was not considered. This news has given hope in the heart of a degenerate demon, but in reality, everything was not as easy as he had the courage to expect. At some point, his rank was increased. For the murder of one, let's say the crowd, he received scores and took off in levels. He even got a strange prize. Well, then accidentally rose. He even got new skills that made him almost a car for murder. Of course, all this forced the main character to feel a little confused and even start to feel despair. Yet, this story is not so simple. The hero managed to meet true red love, which he didn't expect in the conditions where he appeared. The girl in his fantasies seems to have even dealt with sheer, and she also had a cute horn and ears. There were many different acquaintances in his life. Some even seriously affected his life and his life. In his memory, there is also a blonde woman, very similar to his human love. Some of the most unexpected connections turned into a true, strong friendship, which can only be written fairy tales. At many stages, he was able to gain recognition where he did not even look for him. Its stability increased every day. Everything came to him one by one, as if gradually, but at the same time too fast, until he received the highest rank. As if later in his head came the understanding that if his primary plan was not working, then it is worth acting differently. If you do not die, it will fight the shoulders with the demons. Experimenting many different wars, he saw both weapons and magic, how friends and enemies die. Over time, he became more and more fearless. Sometimes he specifically provoked the enemy, whether it was really to die or simply because he considered himself immortal. But among all these moments, he didn't forget about his lover, who promised to wait for his victory over the last demon and becoming the strongest on the continent. She was a princess of races of people, Hao Lin. He promised her that he should not worry. He had to win. They should have a grand wedding. But the strongest demon was the lord of 555 level, Otzian Baola, a huge demon of purple with several eyes, one of which was the most and stood out among the other. Its size was so giant that Shai Fan Liao seemed like a small ant, which could be destroyed simply by blowing. But the boy was too confident in his abilities. With a cry that it is time to accept his death, he boldly rushed to the monster. On this day, it turned 18 from the moment he served the army. He had to become the head of the strongest team of humanity, which attacked the strong demon of the highest level. And as soon as they destroy it, they could immediately regain glory. The guy inspired it. He fought with his sword and a blacker against his enemy, realizing that the millennial struggle between the race of demons and people would be over. But the demon looked carefully at the white-haired and some provocative questions asked him, "Indeed." At this point, the system began to signal an extraordinary danger. It forced the hero to alert, but he did not have time to do anything as the demon began to explode. However, finally, he promised his opponent, "If I die, then only with you." The face of the young man turned into an emotional pebble. "Here? Here," he said, without the opportunity to correct something. In short, the explosion happened. This should be the end of everything, but something went to a completely different scenario. The notification from above reported that until the end of his life, only 2 minutes. Red text was difficult to disassemble in the fire from the explosion. Immediately after that, there was a message with greetings. The 511th Detachment of the Army, headed by the hero, received many victories and made a great contribution to the development of mankind. That is why the dying was excluded. He was available a one-time rebirth. Blondin could barely see it with one eye. His face flowed blood. This choice seemed not complicated. Why not try? With great tension, he pulled his hand up and pressed the revive button. And then, further darkness and some unfamiliar voice. Someone persistently and even a little aggressively forced him to wake up. Like, it is enough to sleep, the detachment is about to arrive. The eyes of the degenerate opened. They burned amber color, as if gold or the sun in the morning. The blonde eyebrows were frowned. It was revived. With unspeakable happiness, the young man jumped, clenched his hands into his fist, and began to think into his voice. So it turns out that I won the Master of the Demons. I didn't think it would be so easy. But the side vision noticed 4 more people on the left. They all looked at him with some condemnatory look and just remained silent. In the air, there was an embarrassment. New dissatisfied with a whisper under your nose is a simple question. Why is it near the ugly demons? Their horns on their heads spoke them. Ignoring the weird behavior of the one who just woke up, his grandfather with long grey hair said that they should get away, because the blue detachment would soon be here, and then it would be late. Without understanding what was happening, the dismantling grabbed his head, digesting Laote's Sagittarius. Soon, in the corner of the cave where he found himself, he noticed a tight, high mirror. A good idea was in his mind that could explain a lot. Going closer and looking at your reflection, bloody whitening even more with the disappointment of life. Now he saw that he had reborn in the demon warrior Erang. But in the next second, he inflated about how it happened that he became. Can it be called a revival? He was the light of the human race. His bride is waiting for him at home. He almost breathed fire from rage until he demanded to the system to cancel everything because she knew these important details. Other members of the band watched and decided. The boy was just sick. The blue notification window was frightened and reported that there was a mistake during the revival. And at the request to solve this problem, the answer was disappointing. It is impossible. From the rage, the warrior lit his eyes when he grabbed the window with his hands and began to squeeze it so much that it cracked on the side. The sadist shouted that he was still like, but the problem should be solved. But the rebirth was really disposable. But the notification reminded that if he dies again, he would be able to reborn into a person. Suicide would not be credited. It reassured rage sharply. So far, the new is unclear what he did. Others decided that he seemed to be ordinary, just too frightening. And soon, people have to attack. It will be difficult for him. At that moment, the Or felt that 20 people were approaching them. In her head, a picture of where the enemy was located was drawn and how the easiest way to retreat. It was Lao Maya. Among the demons, it was known as a magic D rank. That is why she could feel such details. The problem is that, except for His Majesty, who owned B+ rank, none of those who were in the cave could be considered an enemies of a rival. And the key warrior was already caught. Excited, Alao, with frightened eyes, hurried to remind everyone that this is the reason why they should reach the retreat way as soon as possible. Because if the enemy happens to the hands, then the end. While the majority was worried that the blue detachment was already nearby, SHA slowly turned with a cunning expression. It was an opportunity to die at the hands of their allies. Without a word, he took a confident and speedy step towards leaving the cave. Demons watched without realizing what was happening. When they came to them, they started trying to stop the blonde. They wondered if he was sick, because it was dangerous, people there. For a second, Fenlao stopped, but stood for all his back. "I hold them, and you run," he assured with a tricky smile. Of course, it surprised others even more. Did he change so much? Does he want to sacrifice himself for the sake of the company? How could it happen? But at this time, some explosion broke out. A purple seal appeared on the cave, which destroyed everything around. Heavy stones began to pour from the ceiling. The protagonist shook at the flooded passage where he was heading at this time. Obviously, it was the result of someone's magic. Tapping with heels, Lu Binyi, the daughter of the Lord of Demons, with the galactic demon of the rank B. While she told something that they all grew together and no one could throw at a critical moment, the boy was angry with her fists, demanding that she would not interfere. But instead, he hit the pebble easily with his small fist. The girl was standing behind and watching, not knowing what words to choose to describe this situation. The demon's eyes narrowed. He shouted that the daughter of the greatest demon, a pathetic insect, while thoughts were spinning in his head how much his hand hurts. The girl considered the image silently. But the oldest of the demons in the room shouted to the new one, how did he daunt it? It did not scare the guy at all. He should not be underestimated. Meanwhile, the offended demon, I thought thought of why it had not noticed his attractive smell before. Nobody wanted to intervene in such and did not want to continue this dialogue, so he asked everyone to go away. Will people be afraid of them? They cannot even answer them. That is why he will sacrifice himself, so that everyone else can remain alive. In the eyes of the company, it looked heroic, but in fact, the cheekbones were reduced from how brilliant his treacherous plan was. It is good that his facial expression at this moment could not see. Lu Binyi did not joke. Tears broke in her eyes, lips trembled, and eyebrows climbed up. The Sagittarius grandpa carefully touched her hands. "Your Majesty, it's time to go." But the princess continued to look at the boldly walking. At the same time, the completely happy ran out of the cave, like a plane, spreading his arms to the sides. On the threshold, he was already waiting for a crowd of a blue detachment. All in armor, with weapons. They looked at the demon that came to them for a moment, but the protagonist shouted crazy, "Forward, the children!" waiting for him to finally be destroyed. He was waiting for 999 beats, was ready to accept everyone. Without forcing the crazy time to wait long, they rushed into battle to grab him. They waited for him to show his combat level. In the corners of the hero's eyes, tears appeared from the anticipation of freedom, rebirth. Will he be one of the people again? Will it return? But suddenly, a purple neon arrow was inserted into one of the people, and then another and another. Arrows at unexpected speed began to fly near the enemies. Sleeping his hands in anticipation of death, the young demon was shocked to watch what was happening and could not make it possible. Then, the grandfather Sagittarius appeared behind him. In 3 years, he even had to forget about the enmity, though he was in a higher condition and was a shooter CB level. The demon clan used its skills and raised its members, increasing their strength and abilities. After the death of the demons, the human race tries to invade their lands once by one. Due to the fact that demons are not able to find sufficient resistance, people continue to rob and kill. My grandfather told this with a mixture of anger and frustration. After all, none of the people thought about a compromise. He patted the new one on his shoulder and agreed that he was right. Finally, the demon clan gathered together and realized that it was time to express proper opposition to robbers who prevented them from living peacefully. People who remained unharmed were shocked to be a demonic group and could not believe their eyes. But quite quickly they took their fighting positions ready to blow. Our company stood opposite them. Eshol Fenlao was outlined by his new comrades. The recently crying girl also adopted her high condition. Her horns have grown majestically in different directions. There was a purple glow around. None of the demons planned to retreat. People scared that they were convinced that the high rank among them was B. So where could they get out of? It's impossible! The princess raised her hand up and repeated what trained in the cave. A piece of stones appeared over her head, which gradually crumbled down. It was a divine destruction, which caused not only a collapse, but also an explosion that easily dispersed everything around. Thus, the blue union of me. Friends gathered together and looked into a healthy pit in the ground, the bottom of which was not visible. Obviously, those who were in her place turned into ashes. The blonde looked forward. Not only did he fail to die, he also climbed to the next level. For the destruction of the Blue Union, he received 10,230 points and rose to the 10th level. Now he was a Demon D rank. If he dies, he will be able to reborn into a clan of people. In absolute mourning, the monster fell to the ground and looked into the sky in his own tears. He would have died better than he rose. In the night silence, there was a city of Yungo. It looked like 2 rings. One was on the other. In the middle, the bright neon beam climbed from the city to the sky. There were 3 people inside the HO family. One sat on the throne, one on his knees away from him. The third stood between them. He shouted angry, refusing to believe that their plan had failed. The demon was an assistant to the master of the demons, one of the 3 large representatives of the administration. The name was Qiang Duchao. A blonde boy in a mask with very small horns and elfy ears confirmed the information. They calculated the time when Its Highness would be surrounded by a blue union. It was to be the moment when the princess would be in the greatest despair. Then Mr. Otsyun would lead the soldiers to save her. Demonstrated before her her charm and courage. Then he had to scatter all the corpses of people and press the princess into his strong arms. And it was at this point that the girl had to fall in love with the rescuer. Who could know that they would rise and be able to repel the Blue Union on their own? The mission was failed. But who could know that they would increase and defeat the Blue Union on their own? The mission was failed. In addition, they said that Her Majesty awakened her royal power. The old man was a little confused. Was it not something good? The man sitting on the throne was a general, one of the 3 great representatives of the military. Hunt reminded that in any case, all the military power is only in his hands. Hope was that thanks to his status, the Yard would force her to follow his son, and no one dares. That is why he ordered the son to be notified that they plan to marry tomorrow. From the very beginning, it was clear that this plan would fail. Meanwhile, the princess lay dreamily in the bathroom with petals and thought that she did not expect such courage from Blonde at a moment of danger. But in an instant, she rejected the curtain and called her maid, Mel, to call Xiao Gan. He should be awarded. A cunning smile appeared on the face of the maid. How interesting did the princess be awarded the hero? Her Majesty in a latex suit was immediately drawn in her head. Her body was neatly tied with ropes on the technique of Shiba, and behind the suit was sewn a bald tail. In order not to waste a minute, Mel has groomed a stick for cleaning and rushed to the guy as soon as possible. Lu Binyi watched silently, not understanding what she thought at all, and the main character, meanwhile, sat on the stairs among a pile of bottles with alcohol. The system announced him that he scored 120 points. They should be divided among specific characteristics. Not wanting to do anything, he shouted with anger that he was already dying. It turned out to be much more complicated than he could imagine. Now the demon has reached the elite level D1. All characteristics are multiplied by 400%. Power, 56, speed, 41. Physical strength, 61, element, 9. While the guy read about 11 points for the strength of the spirit and thought anyone could kill him, the maid finally broke into the room and reported that Her Highness was calling the demon. Trying to focus his gaze on the girl, he came as close as possible, called her sister, and said he was waiting for when he would finally come. Leaving no chance of thinking, he pushed Mel somewhere in his back, and he just stated that the hero was drunk and tried to understand what he thought in such a state. But when they came, "Faster! Only you can help me! Kill me!" the drunkard shouted. The blonde was pleasantly embarrassed and looked aside, and the desperate degenerate could not believe her happiness. Will it work? And in turn, tried to understand why the boy is so wild. Can the booze make it like that? A huge black hammer flew up to the next moment. At incredible speed, he was heading forward. And then he greeted the head of a blonde, which lay on the floor with a cone on the nape. The maid was standing above him and holding a 100th hammer firmly, which she had just hit a young alcoholic. Of course, it was not until the end of his desire. But today, it was not a suitable time for his death. So she explained her act, looking at the sacrifice with a sweet smile. Today, they were waiting for him. When meeting with the beaten princess, she reported that Xiao's speech was incredible. He showed himself well. Therefore, she would like to reward him with the title of first class. From that moment, Gan received a privilege. As he was explained, the hero could go to the palace at any time. In addition, the girl told further, he was given a costume of King Killer. He will be able to help become a real hero. The maid glowed with eyes. The award was the sacred clothing of the last king of demons. This is the best thing to reward someone at all. As the system explained, this costume significantly increased the power of the owner. They also included a belt, a bracelet, a necklace, a ring, a gloves, and a shield. Also, mask, armor, and fascinated military boots. After reading the whole description, the awarded shocked as a gift. He did not know why he was, but the solution was as simple as possible. The clothes were taken away, the body was back. The girls were told that if they finished, it is time to go. Such actions seemed very decisive to women. The princess was not fascinated by him. He grew so! The eyes shone and a light blush appeared on the cheeks. But when the reborn left the palace, he noticed several people who stood near the entrance. He paid attention to them only for a second. There, one person in round glasses thought was indignant that the young man left the palace in the middle of the night. But it was not even the main one. And the fact that the princess dared to give him a costume of the king. It was a Wei Min, one of 3 great legislators. He said aloud that it was not necessary to reward a simple soldier, and mentally did not understand how she could do so. He was angry that he was spinning all his life and helped everyone, and she just closed her eyes on it, even in words she never thanked. His thoughts were interrupted by the blonde phrase, "Hey, old." This was even more grey. How did that baby get to him? All this gradually forced him to want to move to the side of the demon HO. But further, he did not give him the next act of the boy. He stretched the case and reported that he was giving it to the legislator. It seemed that the old man could not get more shock, but at that moment got. Eyebrows flew upwards, the mouth opened wide and the eyes narrowed. Him? Trying to hide all his emotions, the boy confirmed his words, mentally added that he would like to die, not to become stronger, so he did so. Instead, he said in a voice, "Her Highness appreciates your work, so she instructed me to reward you." Therefore, these things were cautious, and without waiting for something in response, he turned again and just went away. This time, he only raised his hand to say goodbye. And Wei Min has left to stand with a purple case, feeling sorry and shame. There were guards on both sides, almost twice as high as it. Silence prevailed. Tears poured out of the old eyes. He shouted, "You're high! Excuse me! I am worse of the animal! The dam would have been gave me. I will promise. I will fix everything." And our main character continued to sit on some stairs, exhaling. It looks like nothing has changed, and tomorrow you will need to go somewhere else. But the edge of his ear heard some conversations. One person greeted some gentleman, glad that he had returned. And the unfamiliar gentleman did not understand why his father called him and why he hurried. To add visualization to these voices, the hero looked from behind the wall. One of the demons reported to his gentleman that the general decided to do something tomorrow. The red gentleman stood and listened in silence. Then the servant continued. The general had to lead the soldier Demov and make a proposal on behalf of Mr. Her Majesty. And if someone is against it, then they will just kill him. In the thought of death, all these phrases were repeated in his head. They head the army. They will also kill all the disagreements. The next moment of awareness of opportunities came and gave its owner a tricky smile. He needed it. Time to act. A day later, a crowd gathered at the Yungo conference hall. On the throne, there was a princess. On the one hand, there was a general with his son. On the other, people who trusted Her Majesty. Below were demon soldiers. General's servant went to the middle to stand before the princess and inform them why they asked everyone to gather and accept everyone here. Xiaogan suffered from boredom. He did not expect that the morning gathering would be so gloomy. I wanted to go to business as soon as possible. But the demon with the horns, instead of eyebrows, led his tirade further. They kept the respect of Her Royal Highness for 3 years and were glad that she had gained powerful forces. The woman listened carefully until the man continued. The army of people was preparing for the offensive, but with the help of the general, they managed to avoid the attack. Then she replied, "The general works really well, since the reign of her grandfather. Therefore, it should be generously rewarded." At that moment, the general himself said, if the princess suggested, he already had something. The warrior turned and called to himself the same red boy in the dark dress. He obediently went to meet. And while his father asked the future queen to marry his son because they grew up together, he stood gloom and silently and watched for everything that was happening. But the pink-haired was only pleasantly surprised and happily noticed that they had not seen themselves for 3 years. She was wondering if Utsin fell in love with someone. Then the general was paraphrased. He wanted it to become the wife of a young man. On the face of the owner, a drop of sweat from surprise and nerves performed. For a few minutes, she needed to digest it all, and then the girl just pulled out to the side and shouted in anger. They were not in such a relationship with their childhood, but the warrior assured that it was not so important. The girl should have rejected her doubts. A woman is never the rule of demons over the demon. Many lose confidence in them. He continued to continue and assured that after Its Highness came to the throne, internal conflicts would begin. But if she goes for Utsin, then no one dares to say a word. The soldiers behind the groom were encouraging him and confirming the words that sounded in the hall. The gentleman was extremely beautiful and brave, the ideal candidate for men. But one of the legislators refused that it was empty. He tried to explain that the princess should not be subjected to such statements. The controversy that began at the meeting was driven by the young owner in doubt. It was difficult to understand and decide which solution would be the best in this situation. This seemed the ideal chance to get out. The same cunning smile appeared on the cunning face. He was ready to act. By decisive steps, he went to the side of the throne until the old man had only time to call him and ask that he thought. The claw hand clutched into the wrist, tightened with a blue fabric with golden lines. The frightened princess jumped from the throne and looked at Blondin, who decided to intervene. He shouted in any case he would not agree. Everyone could choose who to get married. The ruler tried to answer such actions and words, but could not make words in the pile, and only fascinated and looked enthusiastically at the one who decided to support her unexpectedly. Outragedly, Reborn addressed the general. Who gave this old man to indicate their ruler? While the conflict unfolded, Viet Min scrawled the words last night about the same reward that he had to be cautious. After mastered, the lady began to come up with an excuse to refuse the general. She only had to apologize. But the interlocutor interrupted her. He did his best for their clan to flourish. He was the only general who was elected for 2 terms, a great commander who was respected by everyone. With each subsequent word, his body began to burn with flames. But he continued, "Your Royal Highness should think well before giving the final answer." Feeling the threat in the words of the commander, the legislator released the arrow in his direction and warned that he would not even think about the capture of the palace. He will not let. Holding the bow firmly with his left hand, the old man recalled that HOA should follow his behavior. But it did not stop the demon. He reminded everyone that the whole army is concentrated in his hands. Who could laugh against a person whose back tens and hundreds of warriors? And it really was. The devoted fighters stood behind their commander. All these cries were depressing the princess, so she delicately asked them to stop the booth. Slowly began to agree. The general was right. She had to agree. But in response to such words, the blonde for the whole hall laughed loudly and mockingly. Did the girl seem so easily? Did not royal blood flow in it? Having created a tricky grimace with swollen nostrils, the young man jokingly asked, "Did the threats be frightened?" The horned general grew over a pale brave, trying to remember who he is at all. But he did not have time to say. In his face, directly between the 2 red eyes, saliva flew. The new, without hiding neglect, spat with the general with his eyes closed. He did not have time to answer. He had already begun to clap his face with disappointed words. "Oh yes, a great general. And who in general gave you the right to command? Are you from a herd of cows? Is the owner of dogs?" While the rebel tried to recover, Gan continued. "He decided to mock her? She's the strongest demon. Her status is higher than yours. She is stronger than 10,000 people combined." The girl was behind the defender is silent and surprised, and the control question was even reached by the red younger. Is he worthy of this princess? Then the angry general shouted that he is a nonsense and his son is the strongest. Who can be more worthy of him? Then the newly minted demon grabbed himself by his face and confidently approved that he was more worthy. For greater confidence, he also assured that they and the princess were together in the cave literally a few days ago. The compressed fist of the commander was filled with fire. The boy liked it. His actions were not left indifferent. The old man wondered that someone dared to go against the general. The maid saw suicide bold and brave. People in the crowd mentioned that when Her Majesty surrounded the Blue Union, it was this young man who stood up for her. Although many saw him for the first time here at all. The rescued herself melted in front of the thought that he goes to such a risk for her sake. But the commander himself rhetorically wondered if the brazen wanted to die. At this point, he was already ready to attack. But the brazen just waved to her neck and invaded. "Come on, yes, kill me!" From the fierce enemy turned into a solid red spot. He was about to kill this white insect, to devour everything, to force to regret for their words. Demons ran where, noticing that the general was going to use his grand force, and therefore it was the beginning of the end. He flew up, his hand shone. After preparation, all the power collected in his fingers, he pressed a quick and destructive blow directly into the abdomen of the new one, thundering it away. Everything happened too quickly, so the legislator did not have time to do. Let him hurry to help a careless young man. And the young man was happily staring at the bright pink spot in his chest and dreamed of a bride who would have already been waiting for him there. In his imagination, they were already together, as in old and happy times, his palm on her shock and tears of common joy. And in this hateful world, everything had to end for him, as in the previous one, a huge and loud explosion. But in the bright flame of the explosion, in a few seconds, everyone noticed a silhouette that stood with a straight back in the smoke. The red young man faded his eyebrows and watched silently, because from misunderstanding of the situation to the end, he had no suitable words. Meanwhile, the silhouette began to move forward, towards the audience, making their way through the tongues of the flame. From the rage on the forehead, the boy spoke drops of sweat. Squeezing his teeth, he shakes an obvious and logical question. What demon is here? But around the blonde flame began to burn purple, and a golden distinction appeared above his head. Demonal order. The deadly injury was turned away. The screen appeared on the level of increase. The army detachment was broken, so the main character increased to 40 level. In addition, received the rank A, level A1. The next notification also spoke of new skills. The protection is increased by 30%. All indicators grew by 5 points. In addition, there was a passive skill. The resistance will act when the hero is 15 beats. Then the critical blow is activated. Everyone watched shocked and could not believe that for the first time someone had struck the general. 1. There was also an explanation. The demon, which received the order, also receives the full confidence of all demons. In the future, he is given an important position of commander-in-chief. The princess was in the highest form when she told the winner that her grandfather and father gave him an order. From now on, he will be a leader of the soldiers' army. The girl continued. From that moment, Gan also becomes a general. Together with General Ho, he will lead the army of demons. The former general listened silently and sought for himself even in such a situation. Now he could easily pick up the forces of Lu Binyi. Moreover, the years have proven that there was still no one now who could be more powerful and stronger than him. Among the participants of the saw, all silently stood in a circle. But then, one legislator put his hands on his weapons, pulled her to his chest, and greeted a new general. Gan Leo General. The other old man went to the castle and bowed to him, joyfully, and welcomed his eyes. I went concise, but sincere. I congratulate. The next moment, all the warriors of the mighty army who were present at the gathering were bent on one knee in front of the new general and welcomed him with a new position. Even the cunning servant of the former. But the joy of the main hero did not add absolutely. He watched the noise with his dissatisfied face and tried to understand how it turned out. The complexity has increased again. The red-haired general, who was looking at all from top to bottom, thought that a demonic order was able to win the trust of its highness. But how can he manage the army in general? Did he have experience? He explained with confidence, only he can be a leader. Only it is associated with ancestors. Lu Yun was the most important among them. Only those who were recognized as ancestors deserve power. While everyone listened to him carefully, he continued, If the newcomer can earn approval from the ancestor, then I will give him power. But both of the elders have outraged it. For 100 years, no one came out of his shelter alive. What is the Or going to do at all? General Gan has already proven himself. It would be time to listen to the master of demons. The one who was mentioned did not stand aside. She agreed with the fact that the blonde could not be released into the cave. This is a forbidden place. He will die, so there is no point in going there. And in the golden, eyed in his head, continued to scroll through the thoughts of death and that no one in the last century came out of that place alive. It was a chance, and the old general pleased it. He laughed in a pleasure and wanted to put new conditions if everyone so passionately disagreed with him. But the new one did not let him finish. He raised his hand to the mountain and praised the idea of the leader with a cunning smile. He agreed to go where they would be sent, though right now he only asked to show the road. This news did not leave anyone indifferent. Everyone stood and with their mouth open and staring at the boy's back with mute questions. 200 years ago, the demon clan faced serious danger. In order to protect the clan, Lu Lord sacrificed his own life. He sealed the remains of his soul in order for it to be used to pass a fatal trial, which so no one was able to complete. The elder recalled that a team will need at least 2 people to enter the test. Therefore, it was necessary to choose who would go except General Gan. Among the demons, the whispers ran. Everyone argued with each other. Was it too dangerous to the trial? Can someone go to death from their own will? It was impossible. But for the leader, it was not a problem. He believed that if no one was ready to go with Xiao, then he should go alone. If he could not find a partner, what to say about the reign of the whole army? But at that moment, someone's hand came up, a bright orange color. It was dressed in a sleeve that was more on the scales. To go with a new general for Czech was called a Red Junior, Lieutenant Demon rank Aho Utsen. The father quickly appeared in front of his son and leaned his arms into his belt. He was interested in what his son took, that someone would let him go. The guy copied his father's pose and wondered if he believed that the blonde is better. Someone in the crowd joined the protest. It was impossible to release the younger HO because many considered him the future clan, so it was impossible to risk it. But all the protests were ignored. He also wanted to show his ancestor. After all, he had to become the future ruler of the clan. The crowd flee the whisper. The thought of the demons changed. They were admired by such determination and power of a young gentleman. Some claimed that nothing else was waiting for this new moon. The father of the future clan closed his eyes and put his palm on his forehead. His thoughts were so confused that he was able to squeeze only a weak and indistinguishable fly. The next day, the family servant praised the master and assured that he made the right choice. But you should still be careful. He also added praise. He was bold and decisive since childhood. The red-haired man listened to these flattery and just as dissatisfied with the advice not to let the new one stay alive. During the passage of the cave, he even advised him to destroy him on his own. The young man pulled the mirror and did not carefully straighten the strand of hair. Confidence in strength and knowledge played inside. Meanwhile, in the store, a demon warned the protagonist that Utsin is a very cruel and selfish personality. But he will not leave the opponent alive for nothing. But the assurance that the partner will definitely hit the back only gave a blonde, satisfied and cunning smile. He, as always, perceived it as a wonderful chance to achieve his goal. He wanted to go away, but the old man stopped him, calling him. He had the best healing and restorative potion. With a smile, he pulled a light bag with a blue guy. It was very dangerous in the cave, so he worried about the health of a demon, which would soon get there. This did not bring any joy to the Golden Coma. He frightened and assured that the legislator was too concerned about such little things. Subsequently, in the cave, both participants, along with the girl, stood inside the circle. There was something like a bowl in the middle. The outside of the circles stood demons in black mantles and watched. The princess with their 2 servants also watched for everyone. They were a little further on a white balcony. In the meantime, the light bag from the hands of one demon was transferred to the other. It seems to be inside the pill for blue-eyed. The girl stood in front of the boys and spread her hands to the sides. She was ready to start the test for them, so she asked if they were ready for it. The audience was excited. Crossing her arms on her chest, she hoped that everything would be fine with Gan. No one even suspected that the true master of the demons was about to be born. With complete confidence, everyone in their plan, participants looked at the start. Then the magician shouted the word formation. A golden magical seal was escaped from her palm, which was dispelled over the bowl and formed a whirlwind under the feet of those who were in the circle. In a moment, the seal spread to the entire surface. The silhouettes of teenagers began to blur and gradually disappear from the viewers of viewers. The bodies were teleported to the level of D. The system reported that there are bats around the ghostly, which are able to remain invisible for a long time. For a while, the partners were silently walking the corridors of the cave when the Red decided to interrupt this silence. He said that he did not think that such monsters were in the cave, but only a pause sounded in response. A new phrase about the hazard of HO came in the head. Therefore, the next second, he stood his back to another participant and showed which defenseless. Of course, the blue-eyed did not understand why the partner behaved so. He was concerned that such behavior could provoke an enemy against whom they came to fight. And Gan did not rotate, only eagerly expected when he would have an attack that other demons were warned. And indeed, on the scales of the forearm of the fire demon appeared a red blade, around which the green lights of the flames were club. A satisfied smile of Blondin interrupted an unexpected cry of a friend. He shouted the word flowers. A translucent greenish flower flew right in front of the suicide's nose, behind which a loop of falling petals flew. And right afterwards, that red blade. It died, almost not touching the shoulder of the future general at an incredible speed. The green flower was right in front of the nose of a small monster that resembled a dragon. The blade cut it in half, from which the petals were painted in red. This caused an explosion that instantly destroyed the enemy. Satisfied with himself after the attack, the lizard-shaped sat on the floor with one knee. Only a silent delight and a desire to try to understand the situation were visible on the face of the second demon. But there were few reasons. In a few seconds, invisible bats flew and rushed to the young men. Keeping calm, one of them led his hand to the side, again causing green translucent flowers that stretched behind his palms. Purple bats were quite unusual. There were many small and sharp teeth in their mouth, as well as fangs that were reminiscent of spider. The boys stood their backs to each other, and the petals surrounded the whirlwind of enemies, which now resembled one huge creature than 100 little ones. The cave was short with a finger and the word poison. This was done now by a hand without a scales, but the Lord was the same. The gentle petals were immediately covered with the same green thorns, penetrating each shadow through. The spikes flew into all directions, leaving traces of cuts, as if a thin blade from cuts surrounded all the goals at the same time. After the victory, the warrior, without turning, asked if his opponent immediately noticed the hidden enemies. He was sure that Blondie wanted to become a bait to make everyone to get closer. Of course, he understood the stronger demon. Such tactics were praised but warned. It is not necessary to think that he was suddenly caught. The blonde eyes narrowed from indignation. He lifted the thumb up and began to swear that he saw nothing at all, but he was given a distrustful smile. Well, of course. The red blade was again visible on the forearm with the scales. It flew up and drew a zigzag. In the air, the word murder sounded, and the same traces of the blade appeared in the air, leaving bats, which remained alone to fly around the couple. While General Sun fought with the enemy in all possible ways, he watched in silence in the next position, because he just wanted to put himself under the blow. But the fool decided that they were now partners. Now all monsters ran to someone who wanted to win. Due to excessively high damage, bats worked the appropriate reaction, so they rushed to save their associates. Well, the red not only did not destroy the wish, but also exterminated potential murderers. The level of danger was 0. But no one was going to give up so easily. It was necessary to force enemies to attack another participant in the competition. It was clear to him. He opened the notifications panel. The program reported it about increasing the characteristics by 600%. 480 points could additionally be distributed among all skills. While these scores were distributed, the red again reminded himself of himself. It seemed to him that they were now in the deep part of the map. In response, he was ignored. The partner silently pressed his finger on the screen, completely ignoring another's chatter. It didn't like it very much. In general, the behavior of the newcomer forced the son of General Ho to think that he is simply not strong enough to prove himself in the fight against monsters. But unexpectedly, the earth under their feet was shaking with the walls. The system responded quickly, reporting anxiety and danger to which you need to be prepared. Thus, the participants found the next stage. They were waiting for the battle with the envoy of the Master of Demons. The giant leg stepped on the surface loudly. The complexity of the battle was evaluated by level A. Only 20 minutes were given time. The defense of the messenger of the demons should be destroyed. True, the messenger was not one. There were at least 3 of them. Giant colored creatures with sharp fangs and horns. One of them was more like a black shadow. Teenagers looked like 2 little dots against his background. 3 holes in the white mask watched them. Not only one of them decided to waste time. With the help of magic, the warrior waved his hand again, causing his battle flowers. They flew to the enemy's explosives and dislodged, and did some harm that would destroy protection. But the explosion formed by the petals, the black shadow simply grabbed with both hands and pressed it, neutralizing any action. The fire was all the same. Of course, Utsin was surprised by this, but the surprise was replaced by fear when a bunch of giant stones flew in its direction. It was larger than the whole body of the hole. But to dodge the fighter still managed. The small tongues of the flames touched his shoulders, and the suit of gradually the backs. The fire faded and did not harm. Immediately after that, without pauses for rest, through the fire from the explosion, green creepers with thorns and tips were erupted, as if on arrows, sharp and dangerous. But instead of piercing, the stems just wrapped around the body of the demon, squeezing him as if the target was to take away all the air. The messenger who was the author of this action smiled. The creepers stretched out of his hands and seemed to be part of his body. Meanwhile, the blonde sat down to make it more convenient and continued to distribute points. The blue-eyed hoped that the partner would do something, but common sense suggested that they were in vain. Blissing in a blissful smile, Nu praised himself for the results of distribution. He liked that in total he had only 480 points of power, and the protection was quite weak. And now it was necessary to transfer attention to yourself as soon as possible. Meanwhile, another participant has respected the fact that it should only be relied on. Therefore, he prepared his strongest attack. Gathering all his efforts together, he simply torn the stems into many particles, forcing them to release him and fly away. Further under the monster's feet, other spikes appeared, more like the torn and dry branches of trees. The protagonist's friend Self confidently blew everything under his feet. Behind him immediately heard a vowel explosion, which closed the whole body of a giant which had to be destroyed as soon as possible. But he almost immediately appeared near the abuser. The only thing that has changed in it is the protection that fell by 10%, and now was 90 instead of 100. It was not a joke scared Ho and wiped all his self-confidence. If the envoy is not even injured, then does he have any weaknesses at all? While he was thinking about it, a purple mess with a face like a crow's beak grabbed his victim with a magical purple ring. But right before destroying a teenager, the giant, on the contrary, threw him away, losing any interest in his person. As it turned out, the reason for this was a blonde cunning. He struck one of the envoys until their attention was drawn to another participant and watched how he was smoldering from the fire directly in his eyes. Gan was indignant again. As it turned out that he destroyed this creature with one blow? Is his strength a lot? Not only was he surprised, the partner was shocked as he managed to blow a demonic messenger. But he quickly realized that strong protection in creatures was only in front. Should be attacked from the back. The blue-eyed decided that this was the cause of such a pause in the battle of another demon. He probably understood everything for a long time and just hid his strength, especially allowed them to attack. In the meantime, the So team praised the newcomer. He was already surrounded by all the messengers at once. Because he struck an extremely powerful blow, their attention went to the strongest. While the monsters were getting closer, no one was taking any action. The green giant with red eyes came as close as possible to the target from the back, and the goal turned with a smile. Her plan worked as it was necessary, and now he was the closest victim. But there was one detail. The attacking green had a rank higher than it died and brothers. Having a mark A+, he rapidly leaned to the demon and shouted, "Demons with this rank are very strong, have a high attack." With the current level of protection, the ambassador would have to cope with her literally in one blow. So it was planned. The bloody spread his hands to the sides, waiting for his death and rebirth. Soon, he could be human again. But this plan was interrupted again. Already, a familiar translucent flower changed the trajectory and flew directly into the enemy's back. The red was not ceremony and used a few shaking and spikes and poison. The thin traces of the blade painted almost the entire back of the giant. Right in the middle of the envoy appeared such a hole that a shocked face of the saved and unhappy hero was visible through it. On the other side of the body that was already sprinkled, a rescuer was visible around which the green lights were still sparkling around. At this point, there are only 3 enemies left with them, and all 3 now directed their attention to another person. The person also commented that the newcomer's strategy is not bad. He was genuinely glad that he realized so quickly that the weakness of these creatures was his back. And it was a great solution to put the stronger at the beginning. The colleague with understanding and good-naturedness winked and showed two fingers. He was ready for attack and protection that was still awaiting ahead. But this understanding was to the detriment of the blonde eye's splashes. He grabbed his head and couldn't understand how to outdraw the situation and turn it to his side. With a shout, "You're mine!" the red rusted somewhere forward at incredible speed. Both the monsters and the partner were just watching him for a moment. But with an unspeakable desire to restore attention to himself, the main character attacked from the back of one of the envoys and punched him with his body through, leaving no opportunity to survive. While the wounded, slowly on the knees, two other enemies now looked carefully at the demon they need. Gan successfully and quickly again became their goal, and as well as in his manner, spread his hands to the sides. He was staring at the yellow and black creatures. Stupid, he showed them his tongue and tried to provoke a child's phrase. He shouted to them to kill him. But even this time, at the last moment, with a good mood and confidence in the teamwork that took place in the cave, the son of General attacked the yellow messenger in his neck from behind. Without spending time, he immediately ran from the last demon, covering, "No, me." The angry Blondin demanded potential murderers not to flee. From despair, he again struck in the middle of the last monster with his hand, punching in it a through hole. To do this, he applied too much strength, it seems, because he destroyed it. And after a stroke in the neck, the yellow messenger remained alive. He was the last hope of death. In a hurry, the golden-eyed even ran to meet his opponent when he swung with both hands from above, set up to destroy the target. The eyes of our hero shone with familiar happiness from the expectation of the inevitable. The magic attack was very close, right in front of his face. But the body of the attacking was cut in half those who perceived it for the test and team game. Only ashes remained from the chance. All the messengers of the demons were destroyed. The strategy seemed great. The red-haired face shared his thoughts that he did not think that their cooperation would be so fruitful. But there was no place of joy or pride in the soul of the suicide. He was covered by a true horror. The question of why they were to destroy them all were flying. And the young gentleman pointed his finger on the associate. He was happy to acquaint, and now was able to say it without flattery and doubt. He saw a worthy rival in the partner in the future. The boys did not have time to survive all the emotions that were engulfed as the earth under their feet split in half and began to move. Someone from the ground came from the ground. Over the past decades, no one has managed to reach this stage. Something came from below and said, "I thought the present demonic youth will no longer dare to go to these lands." For a moment, the participants were blinded by bright blue light, and when it dispelled, a giant blue snake with bright ruby eyes appeared in front of them. He greeted the winners that they successfully completed their test and remained intact. But the final battle expected them. The last test for them was the Lord of the Demons SS Rang, the evil dragon Li Yun. What was the illusion? The conditions were simple. The one who can survive will receive the title of the Lord and award from the Master of the Demons. But maybe both die. The boy with black horns focused on what was meant by the last dragon's comment. Apparently, the illusion wanted teenagers to destroy each other. The red realized that he was the future of the clan. Therefore, he cannot die here. But now, his opponent, he was much weaker. But it was obviously concerned with him, because the weak opponent at this point rejoiced another opportunity to degenerate. Both became alert, but the relaxed appearance of the blonde wiggled the future of the clan. It looked as if he intended to win, but he cannot lose. Meanwhile, a cunning newcomer took off his armor and reduced his protection before the fight by 50 points. After that, he also took off his shoes, which reduced the protection by 10 more points and speed by 20. It was not clear what he planned to do. It looked like a trap, but he assured that it was not necessary to worry. He did not have outer space, he stayed in some trousers. The naked young man encouraged the fighter. The title of the Lord and the awards were very close. He could become the only generation in this generation. But the further everything went, the more alerted the fighter. It was difficult to understand the intentions and plans of the newly elected. He was literally a step to success. 2 red blades pressed against the disarmed neck, and their owner said, "You have already won the confidence of Its Highness. You have a military power. You are not weak, right?" Simple attacks destroyed the envoy, a plus rank. The misunderstanding was angered Blue. Eyed, he was sure that if his enemy was serious, he would not have any chance to survive. But the answer of the disarmed was sufficiently sole. The clan will not be able to live without a HO family. His father is a true veteran of this state, and his son is her future. He called himself a miserable, worthlessness, which was not worth the finger of one of them. Therefore, the best solution on his part would be to die. This answer made the Red think. The internal struggle was reflected on the face, and a heavy exhalation broke out of his lips. It was difficult to choose. There were vivid memories in the head where the mother assured a little demon that one day the whole world would be in his hands. Mother's words were loud. They are demons. Their strength is an alliance. The compressed palms in the fist were another reaction to the mother's shadow in memory. He was obliged to cope with it. Cuts began to appear on the scales, from which the blade was a little left. But the inner struggle did not stop. The beginner is ready to give his life for the well, being of Clan Demon. Maybe it's a strategy to lure HO? Thoughts did not stop spinning in his head. He needed this title, but his rival thinks only about race. The illusion of the Master of Demons reminded that the boys had only 8 minutes before punishment. If both do not do anything, then the illusion will kill both. It was not the best option, so the golden-eyed, whose eyes blushed with impatience, shouted at the peer. He was obliged to accelerate why he stood on the spot, but the tone of the interlocutor was amazingly calm. He recalled that the demon claimed that if they did not kill each other for 10 minutes, he would end both. But the essence of this phrase flew past. Then Reddy explained that he just wanted to try something. His gaze became serious and much more confident than a few minutes ago. After crossing his hands on his chest, he began to collect all his energy into the pile. Red and green rays of magic flew around, and at some point, all this energy broke into the air, so powerful that only the weak silhouette of the owner was visible behind it. In addition to this energy, the swallow of flowers appeared in addition to this energy, which should increase the power of impact. The dragon watched calmly, but in a moment, peace in his gaze disappeared. In his place, there was a surprise and even indignation. Red energy was formed into the dome. Green jets were running through it as if electrical discharge. And then, the explosion! From the dome, huge tongues of the flames plunged up. Snow appeared around the ashes, which is still in the same fire. At first, it seemed that under this heat, the owners of the demons would disappear. But in a moment, he looked at both participants with mixed emotions and rhetorically interested in how they dared to attack him. Both guys have 8 minutes until the end, and the redness reached the highest condition. His rank increased from A to a plus. Something similar to the burned beak appeared on the face. The horns grew. A sign appeared on the chest. This fiery sign was also read in his question. He suggested that the partner destroy the dragon together. The dragon was not against it, but mockingly claimed that the strength would not be enough for it. But HO was sure that he would have strength in this state. The letter V on his chest was even over his body, and all the characteristics were enlarged. Power, at 100 speed, 200%. Perhaps that is why he was instantly blown up in the air up, right to meet the enemy. The main character commented concisely, decently, but he was definitely not satisfied with the habit and love of complications in the world of demons. Meanwhile, one of these demons ignored the warning of the danger in the image of the illusion and caused its flowers. No one was going to wait for the blow, so the Lord pushed out of his body a powerful energy that easily knocked down a teenager. But he just flew down. The seal behind his back was able to stop it and allow it to avoid part of the harm. He flew back to the head of his goal with light movements and put in 150 of the damage. Dragon's health has now decreased to 90, 9,850. Then he took a short pause for recharge and, activating Blood Spell, rushed forward again, where he was also ready to rush to the demon. Thin green lines covered the whole body of Blue Illusion. It became golden in color and lost another 80 points of health. Then 150, 170, and 220. The attacking successfully landed until it continued to struck. Perhaps that is why the demon chose the red. Red, who was silently on his knees and waited for him to happen. Smoke from fire, explosions, cuts dispersed. Somewhere, a blue scales and the body of the enemy appeared. To find him and be able to warn him from the next blow, General Sun twisted his head. But because of his own attacks, he could not see anything now. The illusion used this, and without waste, attacked the boy with a blue shockwave into the right part of the body. The touch was strong enough to make a small body on the ground so much that a crack appeared in it. Blondie appreciated the condition of his partner and realized that things were not going well. In addition, if he dies, then the title of the Lord will receive the newcomer. At this point, through the foggy smoke, the dragon rushed up again. His neck was shaking in a blue current, and then it became visible a blue clot of energy in his mouth. He prepared a cloudy impact on his victim. Realizing that this blow to a tired guy could be the last, his friend closed his body. All energy crashed into his body, subtracting 1,200 points of health. The attack was so powerful that the bright glow was almost visible the face of the young man. Subsequently, he began to vomit blood from overload. The body could not withstand intensity. Grabbing at his stomach, the blonde sat above the blood pud and breathed heavily. The second participant was surprised and impressed with him in his back. Understanding what a crippled is helping him now, the demon clenched his teeth. His eyes narrowed. He pulled the potion, one of those who had previously been given. It had to restore the one to whom it is happening 10,000 units of life. The decisive movement of the demon this potion flew into the back of a blonde half. Dead creature, crashed and restored the necessary units. Only 8,200 energy recovered because it was a maximum of a specific demon. It angered the hero. He turned and shouted to a friend, but he continued to throw the potion. Attributes were increased by 50 points. The strength of recovery is also 50. Elegant bottles with bright liquids flew into the body further. The protection was increased by 500 points. All the characteristics rose to 100 points. The system sent a notification by notification, informing the character of strengthening. For himself, the red chose a bottle with a pink liquid that activated its force at 100 extra points and had 1 minute. Gan muscles increased while he cried on the ground and thanked his rescuer. It looked plausible. The other test participant, the extra force, helped to get the highest state again. The mask with the beak returned. The letter V on the breasts again lit up. The dragon also did not die. Its energy almost completely recovered. Up to 100,000 remained 100 points of life. A cunning smile appeared under the beak, and green energy lines and the same color of the petal were erupted from the clenched fist. Two again encountered in an uneven battle. The boy looked microscopic on the background of the illusion. He pushed away from the seal that served him with a support and paid attention to the left. On the other side, a bright blue shockwave was brought to him, which was not visible absolutely nothing. In the battle, he lasted for a long time because this energy was electricity that his whole body was electric, from which it fainted at high speed. Blondin hurried towards. He again covered his friend with his body when the illusion prepared the next wave of attack, and everything was repeated as in a circle. The power of the demon, like the pressure of water, hit a small pale body. Life scores gradually decreased to 3,800, but their owner continued to hold the blow, until his back was broken down into his back, which gave him 5,000 points of life back. This time, the beginner turned and shouted to stop doing so. Every time he was close to death, he was rescued. It hindered. But the Zoboliki perceived it as a thank you and smiled friendly, again drinking one finger towards a friend. And so, Hossein and Ganlio continued to fight against the demon. This time, they fought together until the enemy's health decreased in half. Using seconds of recreation, the boys agreed to continue in the same spirit. They were certain that they would be able to win. But the demon didn't think so. Since the Lord lost half of his health, he entered a new phase. He possessed the skills of SSS Tang, reverse absorption. His health was restored to 100,000 points. The Red tried to understand what the skill was, as he was able to return so much health, while he came to the understanding that even when they continued to beat the illusion, it would restore health every time, their enemy stated without any surprise that they are weak. Assured that they had started in vain, the dragon tried their other power. From the open mouth, they were now directed by the sound wave. Along with this wave, the poison was released. The force of the participants was destroyed. The protection was significantly weakened. Without the opportunity to move, they continued to lose their life points. Subsequently, when the condition of both was close to the critical, both fell to the ground. The higher condition was cancelled. When there was a notification that they were on the verge of life and death and repeated blow to them fatal, H.O. felt horrified. He rose with great effort and sat down, told the partner that all the potions had already been over. And the demon just gathered his forces, which he was still fully. He was preparing for the last blow. When the horror changed to despair, the red briefly claimed that they lost. There is almost no energy left. There were wounds on the face of the Goldenok. Blood flowed from the corners of the mouth, but the iris was shining and the lips stretched in a smile. If he dies, the second will still be able to complete the task. In addition, he will be able to receive the title of the Lord of Demons. But for some reason, he heard the words angered the guy. What did it mean? But no one let him analyze the situation. The Lord had already attacked, and the partner grabbed him, shouting, "Lev, Hope's the clan of demons!" From the last forces of Blondin, he hurried another participant away, turning his back to the bunch of energy flying in their direction. The attack got into the target. At some point, the demon began to turn into a bright spot of light, but he could speak, so he shared with a new friend who did not hate him, despite his clan. In despair, the blue-eyed rushed towards this bright light, calling a dying name. But it was too late. Even a clear silhouette of the former living demon was visible in this light. And then the light turned into a ray that pierced the sky and stretched up like another explosion. The surviving one sat silently on the cold earth and stared at the smoke that flew in front of him instead of a friend. And then an invincible enemy appeared from this smoke. He greeted the survivor. After all, the test was considered enrolled. The ancestor generously rewarded him. All the energy recovered, and a new title, a brave master of demons, appeared above his head. He also received 2 million points of experience and rose to the 4th level. Now he was an elite demon, a plus rank, and 12. All characteristics increased by 700%. Nevertheless, the Lord was highlighted by Ganleo. For 200 years there was no one who would like to protect his friend, and even more so, give his life for him. Ho noticed something to the left of himself while he listened to these words, surprised, and then smiled with a calm expression. The newcomer's death was wrong. Therefore, he stood right in front of his partner, 10 meters, and now he was awarded the title. Thus, the dragon wanted to reveal such a faith in both. The second received the title of Brave Demons. Golden light fell on his body. They both had the necessary skills. The resurrected one received 5 million points of experience and reached the 10th level. Now it was an elite demon, a plus rank. Level A, 11. The characteristics also increased by 700%. In addition, he was accrued 120 points, as well as a SSS, Rang skill. Reverse absorption that restores 100,000 points of health. Watching the reports from the system that reported it, he watched and did not know what to say. When returning, anyone who was waiting for the boys stood with their eyes, unable to believe that they managed to test their ancestors. In hundreds of years, no one was able to. The demon, who served as the general, noted that the prophecy came true. They live in a period when they can meet the demon of the demons that will unite the entire clan. The princess has decided to remind that in the world, such a lord is rarely born. It radiates special energy, which is different from simple lords. Over time, such a lord becomes a creature that admires the whole world. The general with a smile noted that the boy is worthy of being his son. Of course, he received this title. Otherwise, it could not be. But this tirade was interrupted by the legislator, apologized and reported that the Lord was not Utsien, but Ganleo. No one could expect it, so everyone's eyes almost fell. How could he get around the lieutenant? Meanwhile, the Lord was very concerned. Sitting at the bar, asked the waitress to bring a few more bottles of memory, but she only praised the guest. Stripping the streets of drunken, Blondin did not understand how he could die now with so much health, when a passive skill appeared in addition, unacceptability to attacks. Moreover, the skills continued to appear every time new, as the system reported, and each of them forced the demon to drink more and more tears of despair, because he could not go back to his beloved. While this happened, an unfamiliar demon watched from above. He had green hair and sat on a conditioner near one of the balconies. Even when the protagonist turned the horn, the shadow watched, hiding behind the wall. At some point the hero turned, but at the moment where he felt his gaze, no one was. Then the general coiled away, and the small figure of the spine pressed his back to the concrete. Little yellow eyes looked out of the horn to not lose their goal. The fingers kept the wall, but instead they met an angry and terrible demon. His eyes looked into different directions from his intoxication. His sharp teeth were sticking out as if they were ready to swallow anyone. The demon caught a spine. After the rhetorical question of taking into account, the baby spinner sat on the asphalt and looked at Blonder. His small body was shaking and drops of sweat flowed face. The baby's eyes were filled with tears, lips shaking, holding back tears. Baby demon D rank Tian Xiao assured Gan Leo, or himself, that he was not scared at all, and he was not scared. Then the Lord approached him and leaned a little, hiding his hands in the pocket. He wondered why it is followed, but the little one could not squeeze a word from fear. Someone else watched this. Gathering with his forces, the green-haired, he pulled the older demon of a piece of paper and explained that he simply wanted to ask him to accompany him to the rescue circle, because only the Lord was capable of it. The blonde read and began to read the piece of paper with a stranger who appeared behind. They welcomed the participant with the opportunity to fulfill 3 wishes. It was necessary to bring this piece of paper and go into the circle, but he couldn't even remember where it was. The baby hurried to share that he had just received this letter. He had to know immediately, but he was refused because he was still too small. But at the bar, he saw Gan and decided that he could be asked. The drunkard stood with full misunderstanding until the other demon shouted in his ear that it was not true and would only believe it. But in a moment, the red demon happily assured everyone that it is true and he will be able to fulfill his desire. The man continued to shout, trying to bring the boys to his senses. The general then explained that he had heard that the demon's demon had a so-called desire fountain that could fulfill the desire, but did not expect him to be right in front of him. The little one explained that he received this opportunity after having passed many tests and made a member contribution of 50,000 coins. Happy Blondin grabbed the baby's hands, now convinced. The stranger continued his attempts to explain to the teenager and the child that it was 100% deception and should not be believed. But it was evident that none of them were going to think about whether it was true or not. So the demon just thought, can he change his profession? If children are so easy to deceive on money. After a moment of joy, the baby told that in fact it was his last chance to fulfill desires because he gave the latest money. His mother was heart failure. She's about to die. She has to live for about a month, so she should be cured as soon as possible. The unfamiliar demon explained that no matter how touching it sounds, the idea still looks too strange. But the main character instead assured the boy who would go with him. Instead, he wants to give him the opportunity to fulfill his desire. He always wanted only one, turning back into a person. And he was surprisingly convinced that he was very intelligent. The boy was ready to give at least 2. He only needed his mother to recover. Obviously, 2 were friends. It came to the fact that Leo was unusual for him, promised that his mother was recovering and assuring that a baby could call him a brother. Watching all this further, the stranger began to remember. The baby is not allowed. A rescue circle. A desire. All this was like one of the known fraud schemes. Quite quickly, a team of 2 naive children reached the iron door with a pass. The fountain of desires was to be there. Before this pass, the blondie raised a letter that Tian Xiao had given him earlier. It was scanned. The door opened. As soon as they began to go to the sides, both shone with surprise and joy, and then quickly ran the corridor. In the meantime, someone was watching them through the observation system. Moreover, he called a new bait. There were many screens in the dark room, in front of which 2 demons stood. One of them ordered to close the door. With a nasty expression, he also reminded that no one can be left alive. He did not stop his drops that one of them was a small child. When the door began to close, the team turned frightened and watched. And a 3rd person appeared in the room. She decided not to waste time, so she immediately attacked from the back of Blonde. The baby shouted, trying to protect a new brother. 4. The brother only managed to turn around and catch a stranger. He caused him only 5 points of harm and practically didn't feel. These 5 points returned quickly, and the wounded only greeted and asked if they came correctly. Before him was a rather strong yellow-haired D rank and could not understand whether his victim was fooling. After all, he just took a blow on himself but remains too calm. A whole gang from the demons quickly fairly in front of the company. Everyone was clearly not with the best intentions. But the hero continued to explain that they arrived for the sake of desires. Did they go in the head? Did they make a mistake with a location? But the demon attacked only laughed, but advised not even to try, but only to put up that the desire to fulfill would not work. The drunken fool did not believe and was dissatisfied with where the fountain of desires was. It laughed at the company of thieves even more. Everyone knew that the fountain of desires was just a fairy tale for children. Adult smart people can't believe it. The hero had to tell what to what. He fell into the hands of the largest black market in the city. They specifically lured the demons. If the victims are obedient, they may be left alive and will just serve for the rest of their lives. If not, they will be sold to the organs. In any case, the bandits claimed, their lives are worthless, so no one will look for them. Despite their skinny bodies, something might be worth it from them. The demon in the glasses came closer and clapped Bloody on the cheek. He advised to just listen. But in response, he received not quiet humility, but rather a strong blow that pushed him away. It happened so unexpectedly and quickly that other group members did not even have time to understand what happened. Anyone who has just clapped the guest's face, now stuck in the iron ceiling and hung awkwardly. Squeezing his hand into his fist, Gan whispered with himself, "How many times it happened?" From the moment of rebirth, he did not stop disappointed. The baby tried to attract his attention, but in vain. It was not time for it. It was angry with the fact that someone dared to attack one of them. The demons were activated and transformed. They gained higher states and were in a combat mood. Battle equipment had a B+ rank. They wanted to show all their cruelty. The guy in the green suit gathered energy in his fist and threatened himself, they say. He wants to see how the brazen will handle such armor. But the drunkard continued to be in his feelings, and 2 liters of liquor made him even more emotional. Every time he is approaching success, but he fails. Driving his insensitivity to the attacks increased, and he, shouting how bad he, rushed into the appropriate attack, shouting, beating. The new general pushed out a shockwave that powerfully came down from him towards the enemies, knocking them down. She was so strong that she left the participants of the group without armor and even without clothes. Shocked and confused, they came within themselves. As soon as everyone came to their senses, they began to apologize for their opponent. But he just poured tears in despair, holding one of the bandits with his eyes closed. One giant, being angry, shared that they were all forced to do so. No one asks them about desire. The force behind this organization is very large. They can't just take and escape. The Lord suddenly heard the great power. He was interested in asking him who he was holding his foot. He confirmed all the words with his eyes and added that the blonde did not live after that. He is the end. It is only necessary to come to the general. From the very beginning, only 3 worked on the plan. The boy was interested in whether he would still die. While everyone was busy with their reflections and dialogues, the iron door opened and a blue diaper of energy reached out of them. Some of the grouping joyfully shouted that the general finally arrived, which would definitely bring death to the guests. The baby was frightened, and the bloody looked carefully at the one who came. The man was in the height of the door, broad-shouldered. Not fully entered the room, he asked, irritated, what they were doing here. He was dark, haired, with twisted long horns instead of eyebrows. Someone was reminded. And behind him was another blonde guy. But quite quickly, the main character noticed the similarity to the servant of the first general. He showed his finger on the interlocutor and shouted, "Hey, but this is the type!" The yellow, haired behind the boss, didn't like it, so he showed his finger in response and also shouted, "How do you know our boss, and how did you want to turn to him?" But the self-proclaimed general did not feel any emotion. He just clicked his finger and claimed to everyone that he was only a miserable insect. It was the younger brother of Tian Dotsao, Tian Dolan, a warrior and rank. The broken grouping in a panic asked for forgiveness and mercy with her boss. But in a moment, his face, like the face of all demons behind him, exploded. There were blood splashes instead of heads. The baby was strongly spanned. His body was covered with horror ants. It looked too dangerous. Dolan with a slashing, watching the death of his subjects. They also called them pathetic, unworthy. And while the living members of the group tried to remember where the guest knew, their boss came to him and reported that he knew too much. "So I will die here. About yourself a teenager of a puffy that looks like a strong rival. It could play on your hand." And then he raised his face with a smile and replied, "Well then, kill me." There was no fear in his view. Moreover, he added that he gives only 10 minutes to finish himself. The giant listened calmly. Then the golden eyes turned into 2 red flashlights, and their teeth sharpened again. He assured that if the enemy did not cope, let him not blame for the consequences. It surprised everyone in the room, and Xian himself perceived it as humiliation. And since no one could talk to him in his eyes in his subjects, he was about to take revenge. His first attack was 5 in a row. He beat the boy until he was moving back. The last blow threw his body away. He drove his back on every pebble like a doll. But the enemy immediately caught up with him, not going to stop, and gave him 8 more blows. While this happened, one of the subjects remembered where he saw a demon, whom they tried to destroy right now. The 8th blow made a plump to get tired. He stopped to rest. He breathed heavily, sat down on the victim's body. But because of this pause, Gan returned 1,666 points of life. He did not like it, so he shouted, forcing not to stop. The enemy heard and gathered all his forces together to strike the strongest blow from the possible. But, in response, a passive skill was activated. After receiving 15 strokes, Blondine receives recovery, and also reflects all the blows it receives. The attacking felt bad. He bounced from the pit, which was formed from the force of blowing the body of the second general, and ran away to his subjects. Because he could not understand what was happening, stood and rested. It was here that one of the groups finally remembered where he saw the victim and said that he was the person who became the second general. Moreover, he went to ancestors. But the boss was not interested. He argued that his goal was only a lower-level demon, and he himself is a high-ranked demon with 3 hearts. The future of the demon's clan, he thought himself. After these words, he activated his armor and the rank that should make him a little stronger. The appearance of this armor pleased the hero, and he encouraged the enemy, motivating to attack and do as much harm as possible. He did not wait because he had already rested. Just sat down to gain all energy and turn it into blows. And in the next moment, he crashed into his goal and began to take the points of life. 40, 50 points. He struck a blow. His armor partially disappeared and did not cover his body. Some blows took lesser living points than before, but every time passive skills that either protected Gan or reflected its blows were activated. Therefore, quite quickly, it turned into an attack by the victim itself. The body of the attacker rejected the wave of energy. In the air, another 10,000 have taken away from his points. The armor completely disappeared from his body. When 8,400 points were taken away, the defense was completely removed and the word death was flashed in the panel of life. From the mouth of the demon splashed blood. He fell to the ground, piercing the concrete. The baby watched everything nearby, and the subjects could not believe in their loss. When the boss with the broken horn rose, he remained 10 seconds before his death. And he just stood and could not understand why it all turned for him. Then the blonde also rose. Stones poured out of his clothes. He noted that for 10 minutes it turned out, and then straightened. The light of energy glowed around him, and he asked why the time came out and he was still filled with force. By letting tears, the man apologized and assured that he gave him everything he had. He begged not to beat, and in return, offered anything you like. But the golden-eyed threateningly shouted that he wanted only death. While these debate took place, someone else came to the room. He called the general. When one of the subjects paid attention to the brother of the one who came in, the man claimed that he was guilty of his death. The last word will be behind the general. He can't decide anything. Xian Dozhao put his hands in front of him and explained that this premises were a military plant that worked on weapons. He justified that bad management caused this misunderstanding, promised to correct everything. But Gan General was uninterested in such unimportant information. He approached the one who had to kill him and quarreled that there was no sense of them, and they also make such status as attribute. He was even going to go away, because again he was convinced that no one could help him here. But he remembered something and stopped. Pulyak said that for mercy, he was ready to give everything he wants. A light smile appeared on his face. He leaned down and asked rhetorically, "Did he not say that he had several hearts?" But the demon was scared that there was nothing like that, and such conversations were scared. Soon they moved to the hospital after this dialogue. Moreover, surgery started quickly. The demon with a broken horn lay tied. A cross was painted on his chest as a place to cut. Being conscious, he begged him to let him go. But the doctor told the assistants to prepare and reassure the patient. He would be able to live without one of his hearts. Behind the door of the operating green-haired baby hugged his foot and could not believe that his mother was now recovering. He didn't stop, thank you. Leo replied that he believed something like this could help. He only regretted that his desire would not be able to come true. He was wondering if everything was fine with his beloved. Meanwhile, Dotsao was wondering in the premises where the fight occurred whether the general was able to find the energy storage. As it turned out, with a demonic element, everything was fine. The demon reminded that it is the most powerful Yungo energy weapon. It is necessary to protect it. He should not reach anyone. It seemed to him that the army of people was approaching. And it was not the best news for the demons. Indeed, the army of people was preparing for battle. Military aircraft flew around. Weapons were preparing. The captain stood in front of his 1,000th army and ordered everyone to stand and prepare for battle. Meanwhile, a girl sat in the curtain room and talked with her beloved Xiao Fan. It was he who had to be the head of this battle. But the guy didn't answer. He has long been unconscious. Now she was only with his body. She was very sad for her lover and eagerly awaited when he got better. He was lying on her knees and looked as if he were just sleeping. And the princess promised that they were not left so much time. They will meet soon. And in the world of demons again, there was another fight. 3 demons with swords were angry. Their goal, as always, became Ganleo. The swords fought on his shoulders and caused 100 points of harm, but he did not even respond. He just shouted that they would not stop when 200 points of life returned to him. But they stopped and shocked. But the blonde grabbed his head and shouted that they were all boobs. I didn't understand why no one could kill him. But soon he just woke up, frightened, lying in bed, and he was breathing hard after another horror. And when he went up and put his palm on his forehead, banishing the remnants of sleep, a maid entered the room. She greeted. Then she reported that the collection would soon take place, so he should prepare. The guy only asked for a misunderstanding. He soon sat with other authorities. The princess reported that according to the reconnaissance report, some changes have taken place in the leadership of the human legion. It seemed like they were preparing an attack on demons. This time, humanity has sent a legion more than 10,000 soldiers. That is why she called all the important people of Yungo to discuss the strategy. Everyone listened carefully. The last time such a large-scale battle took place 10 years ago. The forces of the whole country were mobilized, but even then they were able to repel the attack. The first general added that they still had to use pretty vowel and hidden methods to remain whole and intact. But in those days, the human army was only 5,000 people. Nowadays, demons have not greatly improved their strength, but the army of people has grown. That is why the first general believed it is necessary to mobilize their fighters. He ordered his son to lead the advanced detachment. The guy was only glad. The princess listened carefully to the first general and turned to the second. She was wondering what he was thinking. The blonde plunged into his thoughts and calculations. He thought that if 1,000 fighters will attack him for a minute, then on average, more than 100 units of damage per second would be able to do. Then the general damage will exceed the volume of his blood. And that meant that if they constantly injure it, he would be able to die. Suddenly, the guy with a cunning expression jumped and shouted that it was a great opportunity. War! The hand struck the table, and the hall pierced the motivation of the battle. The young demon assured that they needed the strictest struggle. But the old general didn't like it. He rose and shouted in response that such actions would be destroyed by the newcomer. You cannot listen to such words. But the blonde didn't stop. He recalled that 10 years ago they repelled the impact of 5,000 people. But now they are coming to an army of 10,000, but they will not even be able to win. Of course, if they help. But 10 years later, they will attack 20,000. And to whom will they be able to trust their lives then? This question was rhetorical, but everyone thought. Gan did not realize sincerely. Do they not seek to become more powerful at all? The princess said his name, but stopped. He corrected his gait and asked who said that the demons did not improve their power. Probably they forgot. They forgot that they were in front of them. His title shined with gold over his head. It was difficult to forget who made them stronger. The princess was fascinated by a new general while he was speaking and could not squeeze anything but his name. And the participants of the assembly began to talk to each other. How could they forget about it? He was indeed the first to pass the ancestor. There was a prophecy of the demon clan. It pointed out that the demon united the race. Demons would be able to see the world. All this did not like the old man. He could not believe that the newcomer was going to risk the lives of millions of soldiers. He was worried because many have never been to the battlefield. They do not know all the cruelty behind the battles. But the Lord was quietly interested in whether they could win with that mood. If they seem now, will they have a hope for a bright future? Did he wonder if someone really believed that in simple words you can win? How can you be soldiers so many years but don't understand anything? Squeezing his hands into his fist, the new leader shouted that the most important moment in their lives is happening now. Sleeping his hands to the side, he promised to win the demons with a smile. And if they are against it, let the blonde head out and show the public. No one could answer it. Everyone made their conclusions. Most of them think about how brave the new general was. But time was to stop this noise. The princess rose from her seat and briefly threw everything that she understood. Subsequently, reported that during this battle, General Gan will become a leader. Everyone is obliged to listen to his orders. And throwing the battle sign to her subjects, she ordered to start. Eyes glowed with confidence and readiness for battle. After that, everyone had rose from their places and shouted, "Forward!" It was decided to watch the war right in the eye. Before the battle, the demons were even prepared dragons. Blue-winged creatures trained in their mode with the owners. The first general communicated with his soldiers. He explained that he was not at war for the first year, but he wanted to note that this time the enemy army is enormous. The strength of each warrior is several times greater than them. He doubted that there was at least a chance to win. Other leaders worked with him for a long time, so he considered himself responsible for their lives. Having stood a small pause, he went from a calm tone to a cry. Everyone had to hear an order. The warriors put their hands opposite the breast, giving honor until the general explained that they were not necessarily going to the city. And to listen to the orders of General Gan is also optional. The old leader squeezed his hand into his fist and whispered for himself that the princess would understand. She had to leave him away. A few days ago, the army of people reached Yungo. They had a lot of different dangerous equipment. The 21st Detachment of the human army was in comfortable protective suits, had powerful battle planes. In addition, they managed to build combat robots. These were large machines that could fit dozens of soldiers. A captain with a scram, who seemed to cross out a part of his face, stared at binoculars, watching the enemy, and smiled. It was certain that the goals would end. Turning to his subjects, he ordered to prepare. Prepare and listen to his order. All demons must die. Blue lights flew into the sky, which were actually improved rockets. They flew at incredible speed. Demons were already ready for attack when they saw fire on them. Some of the magicians have already been preparing for defense. The blue-haired girl knocked goals while her comrades supported her protective layer in tone. The defense demons were small at the border. Therefore, all rockets had a target for a specific small group. The girl continued to knock down the blue lights, and they exploded in the air until one of them missed. A large shell with a golden tip appeared right before her eyes, destroying the protective layer. She simply frozen from unexpectedness. And in a moment, the explosion came. The explosion from which smoke and fire are spread in all sides, and he spread quickly. It was visible from another border, where the generals with other warriors stood. They just watched. The first border was destroyed. After a while, a silhouette of a work that belonged to the human army was visible among the smoke. It crawled into their territory, and behind him, a few more. Everyone had several places from which they could shoot at demons. But something was reminiscent of spiders. At some point, General Ho returned to the warriors and reminded them of what he said before the war. They began to whisper, because it was difficult to understand how to act. They could not sound the orders of General Ho. but he was not the main general. At this point, General Gan shouted to attract the attention of everyone. He realized what to do. With a crazy expression, he gave a rather strange order, staying in place, because it will do everything yourself. It was difficult to comment, so the soldiers really just stayed in place, unable to move from shock. Blondie assured that everyone can rely on the Lord and sat down closer to the ground to push away properly. With one strong impetus, he flew up and landed below under the second border. The senior demon was shocked by such actions and watched. The army of people also surprised the smoke, which appeared in front of them because something heavy was landing from above. Soon in their field of view, quite near, the protagonist appeared. The soldiers do not stop targeting and carefully waited for the following actions or orders. For a while, there was a complete silence between them. The leader, who stood on one of the robots, wondered what was wrong with this demon. The leader was called Lu Gensia. In the Blue Union, he was a magician, and he understood that to go down to one for anyone would be a foolish solution. His attention went up where all other demons stood and did nothing at all. It was more like a trap. In the meantime, many have also tried to solve logic. No one was heard. The guy said they could rely on him. But if others just confused, then the senior general mentally merged. Such actions, in his opinion, could only belong to the patient because it is impossible to cope with one against the whole army. There were 10,000 soldiers on the side of the enemy right now, and not all of them could see. After a long pause, Gan still started acting. He took off his jacket, which took with him 50 points of protection. At the same time, he turned to the enemy, said that their army was very strong. Therefore, he was genuinely wondering why no one even approached the lonely demon. The next of his body was a blouse. The defense fell for 20 points. Further, shoes flew from his feet, which reduced his speed by another 30 points. It seemed like a bunch of people was just afraid of him. Then the leader began to believe that this crazy demon and really went down to them. The golden-eyed met the eyes of his opponent. Lu was previously subject. It was difficult to think that he would be able to grow to the leader, but this meant that he could not let the former leader. Leo well remembered that this man was the boldest of everyone. It was only necessary to press a little. Therefore, the next moment he returned to the army of an ass and shouted that they were all idiots and at least try to attack him. Strange as it is, but it worked. The angry leader could not believe that some freak dared to show him this part of the body. Without waiting for anything, he pointed his sword towards the enemy and ordered to attack immediately. All the clothes went to the side of the guy, and simple soldiers with swords and machines and work with heavy artillery. The demon just stood and expected when the first projectile flew to his body, and the first person touches him with his sword. Soon the first soldier caused him damage 150 health points. The blow came on the shoulder. He was then attacked by a few more soldiers, but their attacks were very weak, 20, 50, 80 points. While they took such little things from him, his body regenerated to 1,000 points. But Blondin reassured himself that he only needed to wait for the protection to fall with the ends. But everything was in vain. At some point, the Lord just shouted at those who barely tried to destroy him, asking him to get up to the maximum. People have frozen in place. Why did the demon look as if he wanted to be defeated? Did the attack in no way affect him? And the leader at this time was able to analyze that the cause is too powerful. Therefore, a second detachment was called. Its participants accepted the command and began to prepare for the attack. While the lost soldiers stood around the target, the second detachment sat in the tank and defined the enemy as a goal through it. As soon as the target was determined, a powerful and bright shot went on the blonde body. Taking all the blows on himself, which were now several times stronger, the demon laughed and shouted with requests to continue. The recovery power was surprised not only by the leader of people, but also by the old general. Watching how the struggle went, he tried to draw some conclusions and understand the behavior of the young man. But no tricks came into the head, and gradually he began to believe that the young general really decided to fight the enemy alone at the very beginning of the battle. The facial expression in the cause of the confusion of the two armies became even more crazy. He enjoyed every attack that fell on his body. Very soon, a reduction in the score of life, which was a little satisfied with the demon, was visible. But at this point, the passive skill was activated again. After receiving 15 beats, he received a recovery. But now all the blows that the demon were pushing away from him. Therefore, when one of the soldiers the next struck his sword on Gan, the blow was reflected and pushed away the attacker, taking 8,000 points in life. The helmet of the guy flew from the head and a wound was formed in his chest, from which thick blood was rushed. His brothers tried to understand what had happened. After all, there were no blows in response. But the wounded eyes looked at the enemy and tried to say that this guy was definitely not an ordinary demon. His resistance power is too powerful. The body of the soldier was shaking. The wound flowed too quickly, so as soon as Abin finished talking, red fluid poured from his mouth. It scared many. The leader at this point became clear that they had big problems. The demon is too strong for them. Therefore, the decision to terminate the attacks made quite quickly and ordered his soldiers to stop. Lu mentioned that the general told about the demon of the rank of SSS, which became the True Lord. This demon has a special ability to recover. The legend said that, relying only on her own strength, this soul broke through many worlds and came here. Among the demons, he allowed to obtain power that was not among them. But it was strange that this demon was still alive. The stop in the attacks upset the True Lord because his life began to recover again. He asked why they stop and not kill them if more than 10,000. This restoration, on the contrary, began to frighten the soldiers. In their eyes, heavy wounds healed. It was abnormal even for a demon. The leader again spoke to his subjects, explained that it is not quite a common creature, but it is worth maintaining calm and simply not attacking it. He calmly folded the enemy with a tricky smile and commented so that he also heard. Their task was to draw the attention of the strongest demons. They completed this task. Looking back, the leader simply threw his sword on his shoulder and folded away as if losing interest. All the soldiers were ordered to retreat at the same moment. The loss of the human race was nothing. As the 1,000th army recedes, magicians, dragons, and other members of the army were also observed from above. But no one was going to let them go. One of the girls' saddled her dragon and ordered the boys to follow her. She was absolutely not about to let them go, so she dug in order to still give battle. Other riders flew immediately behind it. The dragons fell down like stones and, catching the wind, straightened the wings. The lieutenant caught this confidence and ordered the army to attack. His body was lit by fire. Very soon, the riders caught up with the retreating army. It was even blonde. Such actions did not like the leader of the human army. His plans were not a sudden offensive, and he had already dissolved all the soldiers. This only meant that they came to an end. General Ho also did not sit folding his hands. He suddenly got an understanding that now young people were very insidious, which was very good. His successor was not so missing. Instantly, he went into his highest state and ordered everyone to wait. From now on, everyone had to obey General Gan's orders. A flame appeared on his hand. It was set to break those ants at any cost. Everyone was pleased to obey this order. They put their hands near the chest and gave their honor to their general. But even before the general managed to rush into battle with others, he came to the news that not everything is so good. Then he turned to understand what is the matter. There, one of the demons said that the army of people staged a trap. The siege was only a cover for a real attack. On the west side, the army has passed through the gate. All the generals who were on duty there were already without goals. Yungo's civilians suffered from a cruel massacre. Men were killed, women were tied and mocked. Even young children, including a familiar blonde demon, suffered from the murders and bullying of people. Their troops attacked the capital on all sides. Demon End. The head of the former bandit hung in the air. Now he could not harm anyone. But was it a good act? For her hair, she was held by one of the leaders of the human army. The palace was full of demons that would never rise. The princess, who fought with all, clamped the wounded hand and breathed hard, watching what he would do next. A man who was extremely strong. Her obedient servant, who was the legislator, continued to protect her and the palace with broken glasses, but convinced that demons should be evacuated. 3 more soldiers appeared behind the blonde boy of the human race. They explained that the forces of the demons were broken. They all stood and played with words. They would soon have time to play. But the mountains were already flying a fire shell. There was an explosion behind their leader, and he, without shuddering, only turned back to understand what happened there. And there he was given the medicine from the first aid kit. They tried to save the damaged friend and understand whether the demons returned. General Ho, who so unexpectedly appeared, levied in front of the princess and the Old One. On some side, he was pleased that he finally met a real rival, and his opponent was not frightened. On the contrary, he was glad that a strong demon had arrived. And then he sat down. Meanwhile, the senior general examined his enemy. Purple light shone around this man. He was much more powerful than other people. But it was not that it could scare such a warrior. He only decided to accelerate. This was done to transform changes into a huge fiery dragon for 10 minutes. At the same time, increase the force by 130% and the speed by 150. Two swords were confronted in battle with such force that the air nearby was struck and sparks fell from the metal. The battle was to death. Each of the soldiers with unspeakable hatred destroyed their opponent. Tired of watching the demons and people destroy each other, the blonde turned around and intent to play back to the city. While he was stepping, he did not stop thinking that he had been activating some achivka since the degeneration into this body. Whatever you want to die, it still doesn't work. This brought the young man to hysterics. With whitish and tears in his eyes, he shouted into the sky. He had already become a master of demons. Was it not enough? Among the clouds, there was a cliff from which the red thunder fell into the city. If it was a response, only at this point did the Lord pay attention to the fact that he was in front of him. The houses were destroyed. There was nothing around. Among the fire were the breathless bodies. There were both human casualties and demonic. Everyone was in strange poses, scattered as unnecessary. It struck the young general because he was certain that people were fighting with demons outside the city. When did they get log in? A cry was heard from the side. Someone was pleased to let the baby, promise to give everything you want, only they would be released. The guy turned there. There, two people tried to destroy the family. One pressed the head of an adult demon to the ground. The other grabbed his little daughter, who screamed and tried to escape. The girl was more teenage. The soldier, who was her nose, laughed and said he would probably go. At that moment, tears from despair rolled out of his father's eyes, but the rage broke out of him. He shouted, demanded his child to be released. But the hand, which he pulled towards his child, punched through the sword, thus pressing to the ground. There was a wedding ring on the ring finger. The man who did it with a vile smile threw that one always wins and the other loses. The general could not watch it, so in a moment he pushed the scum with such a force that he flew away. The girl tied their hands and both soldiers looked with anger towards the abuser. Moreover, they were ready for battle. Leaving a small demon on the middle of the street, they pulled out their weapons and rushed to the side of the one who tried to interfere with their entertainment. Even with the most severe fight, the Lord cannot lose. Not everyone knew about it, so the soldier in the hat with force swung on the enemy. But this time, the blonde was certain. The army of people flies. For the first time in a long time, he did not just stand, hit his hand in the cat's face. One by one, the general simply destroyed. In several blows, he brought them to a state of death. Only the appearance of the defender was now scared. How could he endure all his health? Was he not a system mistake? But he was interested in some information. Having squeezed his victim's neck, he demanded that he be told from which detachment he was a detachment. Jumping, the man replied that he, from the 21st Detachment, served as 511th Formation. Only a pretty strange question for the demon. This answer drove the hero into a state of shock. It was the detachment in which he was a commander before. But how was it possible? While the bloody digested this information, the beaten soldiers decided not to understand why he was so strange, but simply to take the opportunity and escape. And in the meantime, their cat turned into his thoughts. He did not leave a strange feeling, excitement that did not leave the head. His screams were distracted by his thoughts. I had to turn his head to the side. There, his father grabbed the blade and finished the work of the rescuer. The sword crashed into the neck of people. Then the attention returned to the city again. There were ruins and fire everywhere. The bodies of the mutilated demons lay somewhere. Somewhere, the same dead lay people. Something in this place was familiar. In memory, a scene with aircraft that lowered rockets directly into the windows of residential complexes was restored. The name of the city swept in memories and played for a demon on the new side. Yungo. Exactly, it was. But the insults were scattered again when a baby cry was heard in the air. The warriors tortured her mother to death. The woman lay with torn clothes and did not breathe. The neck was visible from the test. The father also could not restrain his tears from the loss of his beloved, but hugged his daughter firmly and promised that everything would be fine because she still had a dad. At this point, the rain began. The young man lifted his golden eyes up where the lightning just flashed. He stood in the middle of the debris of foreign houses, broken weapons, parts of bodies, as well as fire, which is a little. The demonic dragon Hoan flew. He also seemed too familiar to the new lord. Then, the puzzle began to consist at a new speed. 6 years ago, Gan headed an army that was heading for Yungo. It was then that they had a fight with this demon. But then he exactly won the collision. But the victory seemed too simple. So much so that he forgot about her for a long time. Only now did the sword in his hands remember, and a light cloak that was overwhelmed by someone else's blood. Judging by all that happened then, and it happens now, he returned 6 years ago. But if the events of 6 years ago, why is the army not headed? Where is his body now? These thoughts did not rest. And somewhere the princess of the human race was still holding a lover on her knees and telling him everything that happened in his absence. Soon, the hatred between the two peoples is about to warm up again. But she knew that her fiancé was different from others. Her hand touched the boy's hair, a guy whose war was always fought for protection. But now it goes for robbery, power and tyranny. It was sad. And this is a guy, but in another, a much more powerful body, he was walking among the ruins that appeared thanks to his people, his army, which was with solid principles and discipline. He mentioned that after the victory over the demon, they released them. But on the way, these thoughts again dispelled the dishonesty. One military watched how 2 translucent figures kept the baby. He was holding a small knife until he lay under the enemy's foot and pleaded to let him go. His eyes were staring at a woman who had only recently been saved by heart transplanting and did not know how to make it. But the mother did not seek salvation. She asked her son to flee when the cat grabbed her hair and pierced her body with cold. The body weakened, and the 500 of the 11th Detachment, Bao Li, pressed him to him. He was a Blue Union killer and was previously detained. With a sebaceous smile, he appreciated the body of a woman. Different emotions grabbed the head of the demon. It became clear why everything brought it. And all his feelings led only one word. It is unacceptable. This is not forgiven. 10 years ago, a crowd of demons stood in front of the door, because of which someone reported that the lady gave birth to her heir. General Ho, with so eagerly and happiness, flew into the room that everyone around was just surprised, because for the first time they saw this demon is so excited. His eyes, with adoration and absolute love, looked at the baby, as if he saw the most beautiful creation of the world. Pressing the child to himself, he was surprised what his son was calm. He promised that he would always protect him and Yungo. And now this man in the form of a dragon fought with a bright glow of weapons of the enemy, ignoring blood and wounds. He stood right in front of the enemy and swore that he would not allow the demon, was ready to stand until the end. But the enemy was not frightened. For him, the dragon was a regular demon, a plus rank that did not threaten in any way. In his opinion, this battle would not have to take a lot of time. Therefore, the soldier rushed directly into the general's mouth. Indeed, a few fast strokes with a sword and on all sides of the many wounds rushed blood. The creature screamed. Satisfied with himself, the man just turned and went away. Lightnings have been sparkling around his sword. Without enough forces to maintain the appearance of the dragon, the General Exhalation General fell on his knees. The enemies were back to each other. The one on his knees realized that his power would not be enough to defeat this opponent. He felt he came closer, but did not even move. It was clear that among all demons, no one is level of this person. There were few wounds and the suffering of a tyrant. He was dissatisfied. He wanted death. Therefore, he hid one hand in a pocket and the other raised his sword up. The blade fell, but instead of cutting off your head, it came across another orange blade. Everyone made a small pause to understand what happened. The enemy did not greatly impress it, however. But Ho, who turned and saw that a beloved son who defended his father appeared behind. Is he crazy? Why is it here? Red was not a little one. Succinctly reported that he had come to kill the enemy. The father clamped his wound on his chest and shouted that he would not allow it. The opponent is too strong. but he heard in response only his echo. It will not work, it will not work, it will not work. A pathetic insect will not allow anything. The young man turned half and shouted that he was heard from his childhood, but it was unclear. He was so worthless in the eyes of a person that he admired from his childhood, which was always equal to. Even then, he ran to his father, glowing with happiness when he received first place, and squeezed a piece of paper to show it, get a little praise. And when he appeared in his office, he proudly revealed a piece of exam, which showed that he received the highest score of all. But his father replied briefly and coldly that he knew. It did not cost anything for him. Of course, the baby is disappointed and upset after such. At least once a good word has never been deserved. Everything was useless. When the boy grew up, he came to his father with other achievements. He managed to take the first places and at certification. It was much more complicated. And then it was not possible to see no drop of delight in the eyes of the closest person. With age, he stopped proud of his achievements with his age. Even when he became the youngest lieutenant general in history. When this news reached General Ho, he did not even break away from the paper to look at the descendant. So now, on the battlefield, he shouted at his father with an insult. It will not be possible to get his approval, isn't it? At this point, even the enemy stopped his attempts for murder for a while. The family quarrel was interested in him, but he quickly rose, ready for battle. Utsien stood alert until his dad continued to shout in his back to get away. The younger only gained his highest state and assured that even if the Buddha himself, it would not stop him. All warriors were raised equally. If someone was stepping on the ground yongo, then he had to die. With one hand, the older demon stretched. Due to his wound, he could not grab his baby and watched in despair. People were much stronger this time. The main enemy did not even move. With the same straight back, he skillfully pulled the sword, while the assistants were behind that they were ready to cover at any time. But none of them managed to do anything before the sword was destroyed in the same way as assistants whose heads rolled down. The protection of the man, and of course he was not very satisfied with it. Weapons were lost, but even the older demons did not know what to say. He managed to demolish 3 targets in one blow. It was clear that this demon was a little different from others. The letter V on his chest caught fire when he flew up. After focusing on his energy, he tried to activate the skill of the Master of Demons, which he received earlier in the dungeon. In a moment, a green, bright light was escaped from his body, which was the energy of the Lord. From the general, the baby's childhood was completely different. He realized for a long time that the boy was stronger than him. When he left the office after he brought the report card, the man was happy to look at the results. He never expected something from his son, considered him the best. But for some reason, when the beginner returned to the office with a gloomy expression and turned to his father, he did not notice anything. He sat with folded hands on the table. His face did not express any emotion. It was impossible to read anything. Then Utsien took away the piece of paper that he returned, never learning that at that moment they were proud of all of them. But his father called him a name that meant not a military man. He should not be interested in such dangerous things. There was nothing to happen. Dad was very afraid to lose him. When a young demon came to report his first place for his child at certification, he did not understand why he was so drawn to war. Of course, at that moment the man was happy, shouting that he knew for a long time that his boy was only one. But joy has changed quickly to Sumi. The baby did not meet the general's plans for him. Then the servant could not understand why, when he brings news every time about success in the military affair of a red man, his father is upset. Often the leader sat near the grave of a loved one and thought in his voice, "Is the air really like a dangerous way?" However, he took first place. He was a genius and nothing else could be expected from him. But he said earlier that he would be cold-blooded to the army. The baby, and at home, was well. The further a single man immersed himself in his thoughts, the more he missed. Why did he go so early? He had no idea how to deal with this child. The boy would have to rejoice and live a safe, happy life. But the faster it grew, the more it was clear that it was a mistake. Right now, his energy he received from the dragon, ancestor, fought with the protection of a person who was unable to win the one who gave birth to him. In the bright glow of combat magic, later, the enemy could not even be seen. It was so powerful. Even with this, the blue eyes were always empty. They did not express any emotions as once Daddy's eyes. But it was not the end. Soon the enemy appeared from that light, holding a brand new sword in his hand. His face glowed with joy. He finally found a truly worthy demon for his entertainment. He asked the opponent to show him all, was ready for the most severe struggle. He wanted her. It was no more than a game for him. The game that the enemy easily accepted while the wounded general stared at the sword. He has already seen him before. From the left hand of the finished lieutenant again cut through the bright orange blades. Although the higher condition was no longer with it, the father was still trying to stop the battle with a new fear. He realized where he saw this sword. But the blade flew up earlier than someone had to explain something to jam to the brave. The shocked lord stood silently, frozen on the spot. His eyes were full of shock and anxiety. The fact was that these weapons could cut anything you like. As if proof of this building behind, which cut in half, began to collapse with a piece down. A different cut was visible on the chest of red, above the red letter V. In green, energy flowed from his chest with blood. The princess, along with the legislator, said the name of a friend. Will they lose it so easy? But there was a smoke around the battlefield, because of which nothing was visible except the enemy silhouette. The old man pointed to something of Her Highness. From the corners of the young lieutenant's mouth continued to flow blood, but directly in front of him stood his dad. Dad, who admitted that he was wrong. All this time, all his life, he has forgotten to say something important to his child. The boy leaned forward to call him, but in a bright glow, he looked at his son with a smile and finally said, "He is his greatest reason to be proud of." Blue eyes were filled with tears. No sentence could not squeeze out to explain thoughts. The first general's hand lay on the ground until he continued to stand proudly in his own puddle. His face was still glowing with happiness. His baby was the best soldier, he said, and in the future he had to become the best demon. Therefore, he had to live. So now his father stood in front of him and took all the blows on himself, protecting the most expensive that he had. The weapon in the hands of a person was not simple. To get it, it was necessary to defeat the demon of SAS rank. By the way, the owner of these weapons was dissatisfied that his blow was blocked for protection. Ho used his magical forces to create a protective layer around the guy. He always took the last step. The main thing was the protection itself, all for the sake of Yongo, for the sake of the future. The tears did not stop flowing from the face of a young man whose world was destroyed right in front of him. The final skill of his father was a living wall. He could destroy his life, creating an unbreakable firewall. After his body is separated, the protection of others will increase to 10,000 points. The face, like the whole body, began to be covered with cracks, from which the fire was visible. The most expensive memory for him was the one where he kept a single child and promised to himself that she would grow in peace and health, that he will protect her all his life. Listening to how a loved one is going to sacrifice himself for the sake of the clan, the boy did not want to. He, like the princess, rushed towards the general to help him, but the legislator dragged both. It was clear that there was no point in this. While they ran, the human warrior did not want to simply watch. He had little emotions. He dreamed of seeing despair in their eyes, so he ran closer and with a crazy look threw his sword up. But someone hurt him. There was another demon that advised not to rush to the decision, not to kill them so easy. In front of him, a cube was held in his hand, the thing that demons desperately protected from any danger above all. He was about to give it to humanity and wanted to go to their team. The traitor was quickly thrown on his knees. No one was going to believe him. Who could give an important demonic element so easily? But the demon explained that his clan has been protecting the element for several centuries. From the very beginning of the unification of the entire demonic continent, the first king of the Li Yun demon. His ancestor was the most appropriate face of the Lord at that moment. Even then, some rules were laid. There are 3 generals near each king of demons, one of whom is skilled, the other in the country's management, and the third in battle and military affairs. And only his Tian clan can be near the king without magic and the skills in the field of war. The cube he held in his hands was very useful. From the very beginning, they were its keepers. It was also important that only his clan can activate this magical element. The person stared at the demonic element that obeyed it. He was in front of him, which gathers all the vitality and spiritual power of the demons. Each demon needs the work of this element. The appearance of the next takes about several decades. It was clear that it was a really powerful thing. But can anyone be so easy to give it? It was unclear. Moreover, it was perceived by the human warrior as a mockery. Did he like some idiot that could believe it? There was a lightning in the sky, which charged the sword. The blade was pressed against the traitor's neck. He released a cube from his hands, pressing his palms to his horns. He was desperate and began to apologize. He just wanted to live. Was too weak. He had no combat capabilities, no inclinations for military affairs. Under the rule of this demonic element, even he will die. While everyone was standing behind and watching, he explained to the enemy that his clan had never been very popular. Although they were all generals, but the most recent. Her Majesty, who grew up in the eyes of this general, cried and could not understand whether her uncle was crazy. She reminded that the person in front of which he kneeled was killed by their associates and friends. He even destroyed his young brother with his own hands. As if to confirm these words, the leg of the soldier despised his head of one of the demons. He pushed part of the body under the general's feet and asked if this fat man was indeed his brother. The eyes of the older brother narrowed. A crazy smile played on the face. He assured himself that his brother was guilty. From the very beginning, they were not enemies of people. Why did he fight? But on the question of why the war was starting at all, the hostile captain only laughed. His hand reached for Cuba. He said that it is quite wise to give such an important thing for them a great person. But at this point, gloves flew from the hands of the general. He lifted his finger to his teeth and reported that everything was ready. He fulfilled the order. The legislator used his art to create additional absolute protection. More young demons watched what was happening and did not fully understand these actions. There was a green protective field around 2 generals and boys. Around the 3rd general and humans, yellow. At this point, the teeth closed around the finger. From the skin of the 3rd general who pretended to be a traitor, blood was poured. He waved his hand, and drops of the demonic blood flew towards the cube in order to activate it. One by one, they fell on a metal surface when the captain from unexpectedness released a new thing. At this point, the usual blue glow on the sides of the cube has turned into bright red and much more saturated. It is so saturated that it began to dazzle someone else's person among the demons until it was visible in light. The clothing on the body of General Xian burned little. His unhappy clan has been waiting for this moment. How happy he was finally needed. Although the clothes were already up and his body began to burn, he did not stop smiling. There was nothing to regret. At this point, there was such an explosion that Yongo has not seen. Then it took a protective green layer, which, despite nothing, stood and served as a protection of the company. Although the city at this time was destroyed even more than the fire, to which all the energy collected over the centuries turned. The explosive wave took down the building and then warned everything alive. People absorbed it and just disappeared, dying immediately as they got inside. Demons that were at this time outside the border of the city were unclear what was happening at the epicenter of the battle. They watched how a giant fiery fungus appeared over Yungo, which should have left nothing after him. But where did he come from? And the 3rd general is a little. His body turned into black coal, which was squeezed. He burned alive. The problem was that he showed all his strength, but activated only 1% of the true power of the demonic element. Meanwhile, the company tried to escape and take with it the wounded 1st general without one hand. Xiao understood that he could no longer continue, doubted whether he would be able to endure until his friends escaped enough. But at some point, there was a Dragon of Thunder S rank. This helped him use the S skill of rank, absolute protection that saved all living things that were near any attacks. This dome had for 30 seconds. This extra time should definitely be enough. But now, under his feet, holding the sword on his shoulder, stood the enemy, which looked not very excited. He argued that the last choice of the general was false. It was not necessary to use your strongest skills without learning about the trump card. In despair at the last forces, the demon stretched towards the deactivated cube, which was quite near him. But when he almost grabbed his thing, she just turned into a light and began to fly up, scattering in the air. The fingers grabbed the void and just fell helplessly to the ground. There was nothing else to do, and above him stood the enemy, in the hand of which this cube was located. The demonic element was not scattered. It was teleported into a person's hand. Was the general ready to be responsible for the consequences? The soldier looked at a new toy and understood. Who would think that the demonic element would be in a similar place? Everything around was not like a place where the demon of the demons could be born. But it was necessary to move to the substance. He turned to his dragon to make the game more fun, but he ordered him to start acting. But the dragon was disappointed and sadly exhaled without moving. Something prevented him from fulfilling the order. But the owner was playing with lightning and threateningly asked, he does not want to oppose his associates? Then the mechanical spider on his neck struck. It was like a new generation electric shock that served as a prison. Passing some impulses into the body of a creature, he caught her incredible pain, from which she shouted desperately. After that, she had to put up, and she lowered her head down, approaching a protective circle. The legislator continued to give his magic in order to protect loved ones. He kept the defense, but it was clear that he would not last for a long time. The boys shouted that the princess should be protected, and the princess advised to take care of themselves in this situation. A brutal soldier with a mockery commented that the demon clan could only be chatting. The chest of one of the generals punched through the lightning energy. He lowered his hands and drew attention to a huge hole that shone in gold. There was blood around the wound. The enemy stood behind him, completely dived into the body of the defender, and he promised to show him what a real battle was. The military general could not watch it so simply, so he rushed forward, trying to strike with a single hand, which the enemy seized. In his eyes appeared protective glasses S rank, which added the power of his spirit 50 points. In contact with the enemy, he received information about his characteristics. The HO faceplate showed the level of strength, physique, speed, stability, spirit, and elements. The glasses also illuminated the strengths and weaknesses. The enemy analyzed that the force was 1,480, 4 points. The physique of 1,450, 6. Not very high rates that the demon was proud of. It made him understand that the struggle had to start with the strength. He grabbed the enemy's forearm, squeezing his fingers so he shouted at pain. Quite easily, the arm was damaged so much that it could no longer function in any way. But as soon as the general was pushed as an unnecessary translucent green flowers appeared in front of the enemy. And immediately after that, the red guy rushed to attack the hated man, aimed at his elbow. Fast and perfectly balanced movements, he struck with his weapon, increasing damage to magic. But this action allowed the military to see the characteristics of the younger. In addition to the basic information, there was also a note that pointed to the title that gave an additional 400% to all skills. The light-haired hungry was pleasantly surprised. Who could have thought that among them was the Lord of Demons? He could boast extremely high speed. More than 2,000 is very good. The cunning quickly materialized behind the lieutenant, expressing his praise. Probably he was the fastest demon. But it was only because it could help him simplify the task. One impulse with a sword, and the point is almost complete. The young man flew away without waiting for a blow from that area. Behind him was a thick blood strip. Having made a few flavors in the air from the power of the blow, he laced his land on the ground. In order to reduce the speed of the enemy, the captain pressed his foot on both of him, breaking the bones. Satisfied with himself, he rhetorically wondered, did not think all these creatures that could stand against him. A formidable laughter, as if thunder had joined the zippers around. Satisfied with himself, the man reported that their characteristics are several times lower than him. The whole company was sitting in one circle. Someone was without a hand, someone with broken legs. The legislator was lying near the wounded, slightly less than the princess. Black shadows soon began to appear around them. Some parts of their body glowed in yellow. Subsequently, there were so many of them that a separate army could be created. Thanks to another S skill, a person could turn lightning on the shadow, each of which has the power of the owner. The defender came from the ground, continuing to clamp the wound on the chest, from which thick blood continued to flow. The enemy, grabbing his face, lifted the princesses up above the ground and began to share some franc. He often thought about why they are still alive if so weak. The girl grabbed a tyrant. In his memory appeared. As he was still a child, tied his neck with a kitten with a rope and pulled it in different directions, lifting the animal into the air. He choked the animal until his eyes rolled and foam left his mouth. He was even then clear why such creatures exist. Squeezing the face of Her Highness, the man explained, in order to meet his needs. And then, just let go. The owner of the whole country was defenselessly sat on the ground as long as a whole crowd of enemies consisting of only one person, which by the foot pushed it to the side. At this point, hope disappeared with almost everyone. There was a clear feeling that they lost. Then General Ho decided that if they die, then it is worth taking away the cause of their death. The captain of another did not expect the defender of the state, but that's a little sense. The look of one of the shadows jumped on one of the group. Another shadow quickly found a boy with whom they have conflicted with. Ruddy hair was between the fingers and he jumped, trying to remove his stranger. The man was quite boring, so he responded with a smile to the expression of the general's face, and suggested an agreement. He could let go of the guy, or could also kill him with his father. All he wanted to get for it, that his father kneel and begging for a pardon. Both members of the clan looked at the tyrant with anger. The little one was indignant, called the freak, and was sure that his father would not be humiliated. But he did not even have time to agree when the elder from the clan was already on his knees before the enemy. He understood that the choice was only behind him. The head leaned down and the request and pleas for the mercy flew from his lips. The boy looked at it in surprise. Then the shadow returned to him. She wondered if he wanted to ask for his father. After all, that could be released. The reaction of the young man was much brighter. Instead of falling down immediately, he shouted and called the bastard of the one who dared to put the conditions. Of course, it did not pass it. The magical sword was in the chest of the general, breaking through a recent wound. The upcoming count has begun. 10. He was not allowed to help a loved one with another shadow, which was held by one hand for his hair and the other by his shoulder. The sword was taken away and blood was rushed from the wound. The score of 9 was that the sword walked on the single hand of the victim and cut her into the elbow. At the expense of 8 swords, he climbed higher to his shoulder and cut off the remains of the limb. Blood loss was incredibly high, and the young man was silently watching the body cut the body of the one who was near the first day of his birth, and tears were pouring. The 7 account became deep cuts on the victim's torso. It forced him to lean back and almost fall. But he could not watch this Utsien, so he kneeled at the moment when 6 were struck. The tears fell down one by one when he also pleaded to release his dad. He did not lift his eyes. Now that both of the oar leaned before him, he thought about which 2 of them to release. But to make his choice, he did not give him a general. He squeezed his body into his sword, piercing his heart through. However, the younger felt exactly the same pain, not physical. In despair, he shouted and cried, realizing what had just happened. Without any hesitation, the man looked straight into the eyes of his killer and asked to release Utsien again. Wiping someone else's blood from his face, the man was dissatisfied with who allowed this demon such a self-willow. Taking from his body his sword, he called a dying freak and scorned his gaze. The mood of the psychopath was spoiled, so he told all those present that he changed his mind. He wanted to offer something else, but he was not allowed to agree. Angry because of what happened to his father, the boy rushed into battle, not allowing the opponent to even think. But the opponent was ready and decided for himself that a new game began. But it could end too fast. The sword, having visited his father's chest, was now in his son's chest. He leaned over the blade and leaned his hands. A wide chain with thorns was visible from the ground. He grew into the ground and kept through magic. At different height, but hung the shadows of each of the members of the company, which fell into the hands of the maniac. In a similar way, he had suspended his victims. Everyone died different deaths. But everyone was suspended at the end of the rope. This time, the victims were still alive. Therefore, they could be extracted. He started with the strongest. The commander was wondering how much the young demon was enough, so he continued to cause one damage after another. At some point, he decided to pause and called to approach him closer to the dragon. When he leaned to the owner, the tyrant just sat on him and was satisfied that time to prepare for the end of the celebration. Squeezing the earpiece, he called the captain's substitute. The subjects should already be fed. He was satisfied to inform the entire army that it is time to gather and move away. But in response, he heard not quite what he wanted. Someone was surprised by the force on the side of the communication. Then the unknown voice asked how another someone dared to rise a riot. It was not like the norm, so the manager tensed. The time was more serious, so the fun went to the background, and the first was the question of who was communicating with him and where Bao Li at all. The answer came to him at the same time and heard from the head and heard from somewhere behind. It made him instinctively turn. Gan Leo stood in front of him. He suggested that the enemy had already understood in which the situation was his substitute. They were attracted to clothes. The gloomy demon threw words that he did not think that the authorities would capture the authorities. In addition, he did as the last pig. In order to fully understand what was happening, the bloaty explained that they killed them all. And it was difficult to say because they were all his team before. But the human leader was sitting quite far, at the very top of his dragon. He was more like a white dot in the sky. Understanding what the unfamiliar demon was saying was difficult. It was like a monologue who was able to listen to accidentally. But he continued. He had to guess for a long time. Animals will remain animals forever. But the actions of the captain of people are difficult sins that need to be responsible. And punishment. Of course, his words were mostly ignored. The opponent decided that these were only one of the demonic world's scum. And he rose, preparing himself for battle. The time for the demon was to die. With such a thought, the crazy attacked the main character with the sword. However, the hero hit him in his face. He broke his nose and at the same time, even before the old acquaintance has come to him from his past life. In this way, he couldn't analyze. Immediately after the face of the demon sank on the enemy's neck, squeezing it with such force that he could not move. At this point, the turn of the golden-eyed is to ask if it is time to start their game. They began to play with the transfer of sins, to reconcile, toddle with other women, to rob, and to kill comrades. It was difficult to decide what to start punishment. Through the broken glasses and clenched teeth, the offender of the thorns who do not understand at all what the language is. His substituent, who was far from his captain, intervened in the conversation and reported that something was wrong with this demon. And he understood this from the moment of the first meeting. He knew people too well. If you go back a little back in time, during their meeting, Lee ordered 2 ice puppets to kill everyone. He held a tired woman in his hands. As he was approaching her head, he whispered to her sweet words about her sweet smell. The woman did not hold back tears. While his hands were unbuttoned and removed his pants, he also ordered not to touch her son, who just shouted to his mother. Lying the hostage ear, the man whispered that he wants the little one to see a man playing with his mother. But just when his sticks descended under the pants of the Red Beauty, the puppet was scattered into dozens of small pieces. The second puppet, which kept the name of the protagonist, was destroyed. It was he who corrected this situation. When the new demon was noticed, Bao decided to create another monster for help to have time to play. Before him was an ice giant and rank, closing the path to salvation of an unhappy girl. There was no excitement in the soul of the abomination. The puppet created had half of his blood and health, so she should withstand long. But Blonde had a skill of D rank, ability to be faster than the wind. Therefore, using it, he crashed into the ice. Thanks to this, he was able to punch a through hole in the giant, through which he flew through the whole body. Immediately after the ice, she met the face of the scum, knocking out his teeth at the same time. The soldier turned in the air several times and landed his head into the ground like an ostrich in the sand. And for the successful use of a devastating stroke and the rank, the demon received 500,000 points of experience. His level increased to 12. There were 102 additional points that could be used to improve. In addition, a new skill was added to the obtained level, which could be tested right now. The skill of S level was also unblocked. Now the hero could copy the abilities of the opponents. But the enemy lay in a few meters almost dead as the baby finally embraced with his mother. When the abomination woke up, Blondin began to ask him what happened to his army. The courtman began the story. At first, 511th Detachment was run by Eshai Fan Liao, and his substitute was Wen Huan. But about half a month ago, the substitute staged a banquet in honor of his engagement. For some reason, they decided to act that day. The captain was not present on the banquet that day, so it gave them a wonderful opportunity and green light. As long as everyone was drunk, they were from Xin Xiao to the captain's substitute camp, where he was with his wife. They then tied him up, told that they planned to put the captain, allegedly taking bribes. All things Bao had already taken off Bao, so the substitute was to sit quietly. Then a tyrant who cut both hands to General Ho and asked to be a captain. He even suggested that the bridegroom make his substitute in this case. They could go on Yungo together. But of course the guy refused. He had little mind, he did not want to rebel. But he was made aware that they had come not to bargain. They gave it to the fact that they undressed before his bride. It was clear that not with the best intentions. On that day, he was the first marriage night of the substitute. He was tired and forced to watch his wife corrupted by a stranger. Then the magician tried to collect energy in order to destroy the abusers and rebels. But nothing was done. His alcohol had poison, so it will not be possible to use magic. Cracks appeared on his face. Blood flowed from his nose and mouth. It became clear that it was useless. Therefore, the current captain asked the former substitute for the last time whether he would go against the captain with them. And this time the answer was obviously negative. In the aggressive tone, the young man wished them all the best. And since Wen Huan was not afraid of death, he died with his wife from many knife wounds, and all because they refused to persuade their leader. They left in place after what happened, things often used by Fan Liao. When people coincided, they could not believe what had happened and tried to do themselves, at least doctors. Our crazy then assured everyone that the evidence indicates that the captain was in a hurry, leaving the scene of the crime. After that, he even led the entire army into the leader's camp in order to deal with him. However, no one could think that the camp owner in the camp would no longer be found. It seemed like he rushed to flee. Even the equipment and weapons that he always carried with him left in the camp. Then Sin invited a search warrant to the god on the basis that Shai was caught on the preparation of the rebellion, raped his friend's wife and disappeared, having committed the murder. The wonderful captain became an army sinner, and his weapon and equipment took himself a new captain. The leader who was elected new right before the war. He managed to become the supreme commander, in chief on his father's recommendation. The story was completed. So the substitute, who all this time hung his head down, dared to ask the demon why he was interested in human affairs. But no one gave him the answer. On the contrary, the counter-question was, and others? No one understood anything anymore? The court asked if the demon asked about those fanatics, and immediately explained that they were resisting. But they immediately sacrificed. He added that he could not understand such, it was necessary to behave differently. Why in the army in general such a strange system? After the story, Li asked to let him go, and in return promised to talk to the captain of the Blue. He may agree to leave the demon alive, but instead the Lord spilled his groin with a blade. Of course, Bao rested, used swearing and humiliation, but it did not produce results. Maybe General Gan would continue, but behind him was a woman. She looked very concerned. After that, she came to him. She had a fighting form that he once gave General Vai Min. All this time, General brought her for the Lord. She explained that the demon predicted that the crisis would come, so in this case, he asked to convey the form to Blonde. She asked to pick her up and run. The general considered a newcomer to the last hope of the demons. The demon took the package and heard that he should not die. But a woman with tears on her face added that she received a message from Vai. It seemed like something happened to them. This time, the blonde decided to put on the shape. It had a mask that raised the power of the elements, general characteristics, physical strength, confrontation with negative effects. Also, some parts of the form made it possible to avoid a deadly stroke, to change the form of embodiment. The form also included shoes, armor from the scales of the demon and weapons. After evaluating all the possibilities of his new costume, the demon used the reincarnation skill. Therefore, his clothes changed. After completing all these cases, the general grabbed the collar of the court scum and pulled him forward. To the warning that the exit was not on the other side, he briefly replied that the fleeing was not going. The protagonist needed to meet with Chiao. He stepped forward and ignored the comments of the offender, who threatened that it was impossible to withstand such a person. Now, listening to the whole history of his substitute, the captain was teleported behind the back of the True Lord, closer to his subject. He then brought the broken glasses to the way until they reported that they could show the characteristics of others again. He found a new opponent with his eyes. The glasses reported that a demon was in front of him. Not all of them were known. After the evaluation, Sin smiled satisfied. Except for strength, all the characteristics were solid debris. Just an ordinary demon of elite rank, with speed twice as lower than he has. If you rely on the characteristics, this demon had to rely solely on its luck. Several shadows flew to his direction. Despite the fact that the person was certain that the enemy could not last for a long time, the enemy, in turn, showed the other side. He responded instantly on the attack in his direction. All the shadows that tried to harm him were flying in different directions. It looked like something impossible because Leo was not as strong as an attacking one. For some reason, such a counterattack did not joke the captain. Now he had the question of who is the demon in general. His power was equal to 4,102, but thanks to weapons, the characteristics of the soldier were equal to 5,420. 4. At the same time, the speed of the demon is 1,477, and he has 3,732. Therefore, he could not be faster. But after reflecting the attack, Sin wondered whether any hidden skills were in his opponent. While Gan advised not to rely on the second-rate data, the person still tried to read the extended information somehow. But because the attribute was obtained for the title, some data could not be found. At this point, Leo just found the interlocutor and hit him again. Did he really think that he could see everything? Lightning appeared in the air. In addition, there was heavy rain. It was not our heroes. With new shadows that took other forms, they flew towards the goal. The liver categorically disagreed with his enemy. It was difficult for him to believe that there was someone who could not harm with such ease as everyone around. His blows were easily reflected. After a few series of unsuccessful attacks, the Shadow Captain has lit up with anger. The speed of a demon could not match his own. But for some reason, he could not follow and notice in time how the enemy was right behind his back. To give him or her to navigate, no one was going to, so the bloody struck with a hand that threw this shadow a few meters up and away. Only then did the invaders try to put up with what seems to be unable to see true characteristics. Understanding what to press on some characteristic will not work, the shadow approached the princess. Living creatures could always be manipulated thanks to their loved ones. One chain now wrapped around her neck. The shadow kept the end of this leash and shouted to the enemy. It was necessary to draw his attention. But Red, who all this time watched the fight, reproached the enemy that there was no point in using such insidious tricks. Still, you will not be able to win. The chain around the neck of a fragile girl was wrapped several more times, overlapping access to the air. It was only necessary to squeeze the delicate skin a little more, and it is no longer saved. The junior general looked dissatisfied with the enemy's actions, children's manipulations that he has long been familiar with. The representative of the human race seemed to be more and more crazy with every minute. Now he just shouted that everyone would come. In order to seem more convincing, he sent one of his shadows, and now the chain also flashed around the lieutenant's neck. Two comrades who were not in the best conditions before were now on the hair from death. The psychopath, who adored, obviously put opponents before the choice, has now suggested that something do something. His call went into a weak provocation. He pointed out that despite the speed, the Lord was not one here. If he dared to save someone one, the other would immediately turn into a dead body. But instead of responding somehow or answering, Leo decided to act, gaining speed. He rushed forward. It was quite unexpected. Squeezing her teeth, the shadow noticed that the goal was not scared and really ran. This movement was noticed by the general's friends. Red shouted that it was worth saving Her Majesty, but his friend climbed from all speed in his nostrils and to the mouth of one of the shadows. It looked rather strange, but it was done to discard the lounge of the partner. True, the Red did not delight. On the contrary, he tried to understand why the Lord chose to save him, not the princess. However, no one said that only one demon was rescued. To the side, a shadow inhabited by a long sword blade was visible, and Her Majesty quietly lay in the hand of an ice puppet of plus rank. Safe, free. Obviously, the giant made of ice obeyed the one who created it. The blonde commanded the assistant to help his friends. The slight movement of the puppet broke the chains that kept the company all this time in different positions and at the same time served as a way of manipulation. Bao was all this time at a distance from the events, so he could only watch. When his eyes came into the skill that belonged to him, he was surprised, because when the demon could learn to learn, in his entire life, he was the only one who could use such puppets. That is why it was both offensive and surprisingly at the same time. When one of the shadows tried to attack this ice monster, he simply grabbed the enemy by his head, squeezing with one hand. The hand brought the body into the ground, and then the general explained that this creature has the same power as its owner, and this meant that lightning copies would not be able to influence it much. A little earlier, Leo unlocked the new S-rank skill that allowed him to copy any skill and attack of the enemy. It did not depend on the element. Then he thought about what I would like to copy, and now I realized that then it was the right solution. Bloody ice puppets, though very powerful, still had weaknesses. The first weakness is that to activate this skill, you need to take an element of water somewhere. But if you find water not so difficult, the second weakness was more complicated. Blood is required to create a puppet. Before that, the blood is not so small. The puppet needs to be asked, and if the general said that the puppet has the same force as in him, then it should mean that the volume of his blood, it was not so difficult to guess how to do it right. The substitute shouted to his captain that it was not necessary to fight the puppet. The captain's foot was hiding from his enemy behind the dragon's foot. He explained to him that since he uses his skill, he knows exactly that the best moment of beat the enemy is now. He should give most blood volume to feed his toy. One of the shadows was prepared for the attack. She was convinced that one blow, and the demon end. With her maximum speed, she attacked Blondin from the back. She made several beats. These blows were taken without a single emotion, and when he managed to move away at a safe distance, he stood with the belief that he had just managed to win. But the novice in the world of demons stood without moving. He just threw a short, "Continue," to his enemy when the smoke from the attacks was a little scattered. It was another surprise. The shadow turned and looked at the living and completely unharmed demon. So it turns out that he did not die? He was amazed, so you had to try more. This time, several shadows rushed to the side of the figure in a blue coat. Instead of fighting, she just stood and was waiting for something. In turn, copies caused him critical damage, who is 100, who are 300 points in life. In response, the ghoul did not even move. She just looked at the baby and wondered if there was something else. In order to at least somehow help you deal with the victory, Sin again activated his scanner thanks to his glasses. The skill reflected that the reserves of the blood of the demon were filled to the very top. And from that moment, another mystery appeared. Where did he have so much of this fluid? When it was clear that everyone was playing, the protagonist decided to try to activate his other skill, the illusion of a demon of heaven. It was very different from the majority. His abilities and even his character were different. In his hand, a sword of shadows appeared. The skill began to charge units of life every minute. The number was frantic, 100,000 every time. Of the whole situation, only one correct conclusion could be drawn. You need to run away as soon as possible, because it is impossible to win. In the sky, as if in response to his conclusion, it thickened. Blue lightning appeared. It could help. There was enough thunder in the sky. Many copies could be created so that the enemy could not win on its own. But the enemy thought a little differently. He specifically cut his hand with his blade to activate a bloody ice puppet. Passive skills were activated independently and resumed blood. Having strengthened her toy a little, the bloody told her that she relied on her. It took a little help. So, in a moment, a giant ice puppet sat in one circle with wounded demons that could not somehow help in battle. The princess looked up in surprise, and again, after some analysis, Bao joined. He thought that it had to be understood before. This stranger is too much concerned about people's problems. Moreover, he was aware of all the skills of the current captain, which is why he could easily block them or ignore them. He knew everything better than everyone was taken here. He was not a demon. Golden eyes flashed when the general assured that it was rain, snow, or a clear sky. Everything is not so important. The legs were made step by step, and there were more and more puppets that, as if from graves, climbed from blood and water. Water was more than enough. Each of the copies of a person was at his fingertips. It was really fool to assume that it would be possible to win. A real war was unfolded on the battlefield, which participated in only 2 creatures, and at the same time hundreds of copies. Lightning Shadow tried to overcome the figure from the blood and ice. The captain wanted to fight the demon itself, but it was too difficult to catch it. Still, he was really faster and cunning. During his time, he has not used any skills. In addition, he was able to accumulate many abilities which will now be able to play him in his hand as an illusion of a heavenly demon. This illusion has created a supersonic cast on the demon. He wanted to finish this battle at last. The real leader of the human army continued to hide and think. He had no chance of winning the struggle of the tete-a-tete, and he understood it clearly. It was scary to imagine what the enemy was capable of. Yes, he had an extremely strong ability to recover, but during the attack was still spending health. He could not be immortal. The man remembered the Muse, his weapon SSS rank, which is able to accumulate energy and has the ability to protect. If you saturate this sword with energy, it will be possible to solve everything with only one blow. The weapon was tied to the body of the traitor and should follow him anywhere. But as he thought about it, the ice puppet shook his chest from her back. Its copies, when he disappeared from the hands of the killer, began to sparkle brightly and seemed to be magnetized. The soldier was alive. He was rescued by the ability to switch instantly between his copies, so it was almost impossible to kill him until they were with him. And Lee continued to analyze the battle. He realized that his captain was using Thunder and Zipper to constantly create copies and pass between them. Until it manifests itself, the enemy will not kill. At the same time, the ice puppet had time limit, no matter what the volume of blood in the carrier. It is impossible to endlessly create copies. Therefore, the carrier loses. All this analysis, the wounded soldier said aloud, which is why he could hear both men who fought. But the carrier himself didn't think so. Do not agree with the buckets with the conclusions. He clamped his neck with one of the copies. Due to this, the shadow could not escape. The blonde reminded that he had previously said that the human captain should receive his punishment. In memory, a picture came where he was still a child. Holding the scissors in his hands, all in the blood, he asked his sacrifice not to die. The tied kitten lost consciousness and just had no strength to live. And the baby was dissatisfied because it has not yet been warmed. Blondin whispered in the ear of a tyrant that every crime will return in a multiple size. The demon costume for a moment turned into a snake skin. All the pain that sin has caused living things returned to the general back. Each of the shadows now observed different parts of the body deformed, covered with wounds and other damage. It was also an interesting ability of the demon. Grazing the head of the enemy, Gan reminded him of how the participants of the coup managed to raise the rebellion. Rape women, mocked children, and crippled comrades. He lifted the body of the accused above the ground, passing all that pain. Even death could not block all the sins that lay on this ugly soul. And the real captain, while hiding, began to feel the pain of each of the shadows. He wondered how unbearable it was. The blonde cut one of the copies in half, knowing that the traitor's body would be able to feel it, and he wanted him to feel. At this point, the captain's substituent rescued his eyes with the clowners and realized that he was wrong. No one planned to kill his captain. They just mocked him. The captain at this time tried to help himself somehow, because every damage to the shadow, he harmed him. He tried to invest all the energy in his weapon. In this way, he will be able to restore his strength. For a while, he could not do it, but then the sword became energy. Succeeded. Came. The full energy of the sword, which served to him and protection, and the opportunity to attack, raised the crazy over his head. This blade should destroy the demon clan. Many years ago, an incomprehensible animal jumped in the forest from a branch. She listened to the sounds and was very careful. And below the same forest was the people who were looking for a thunderous dragon. But over time, they resigned to the fact that their goal simply fled, unfortunately. However, the goal hid in the woods directly above the hunters and quietly watched how they just went away. When the animal turned, she felt a real horror. A meter from her sat a man who chewed the cookies and looked straight at the little dragon. It was Sharma Fanliao in his own years. The animal got into alert. Her eyes were red. She planned to defend herself at any time when the situation would need. But before the eyes, a palm appeared on which the cookie pieces lay. The boy was wondering if they needed. With an indifferent face, he explained that a war for the possession of a magical crystal recently began between people and demons. Many people were starving. The beast sat closer and listened to the stories of a child who explained that she would just like the war to end as soon as possible. Nowadays, the giant dragon leaned closer to a light figure that was still standing and expecting an attack from the enemy. The hand of the new general flew up. The word return sounded. While there was a fog around, it was difficult to see something. However, it was optional. He understood what would happen. The sword in the hands of the captain began to disassemble himself into small particles and fly out of the hands of a stranger. Instead, he returned to his true ruler's handout and put back in a single weapon. Such an action of the sword struck the traitor. He did not think it would be possible if the weapon was already tied to another person's body, and more specifically, to his body. Nothing was going to explain the golden-eyed. However, he thanked her cold for improving his blade. Handling his weapon from top to bottom, he created a wind whirlwind around him. But a small whirlwind around him became a real storm for those who were away. The element took the shadows and copies, collapsing them into parts, erasing their existence. The dragon was as close as possible to the war of the demon clan. Only at this point did the captain's substitute understand who was fighting them now. A huge animal looked at a small dot that offered him cookies as a child. In his soul, he was the same little beast. He said mentally, "You returned." Copies made from lightning were burned in the eyes. Small shadows ran everywhere, some without hands, some completely without the upper body. They gradually smoldered until they disappeared. Along with copies that flew away, dark clouds, thunder, lightning disappeared. The sky began to be cleansed. Sin, which was not now possible to hide among his clones, was sitting in his blood when a metal and such familiar sword appeared behind him. 2 years ago, nevertheless, in the state of Shenhua, the little finger pointed to the canyon and the forest. He asked someone whether the one saw where the demon fell. At 16, Fan Liao was already a good friend with a dragon found once. He called him to go to the demon, but in response, he heard only something like barking. His friend shook his head in different directions, but the boy smiled cunningly and showed he didn't understand what it means. It looks like a friend is pretending to be a dog. The animal looked at the blonde side and he just shrugged and reassured the winged. They say he knew that he was not a dog. Who can think so at all? The beast turned away, his cheeks blushed as far as possible, and the boy only laughed and assured that he was his main partner. But they say that many years ago, dogs were also friends for people. The dragon shouted loudly when the collar between his scales sent an electric blow to the body again. The thunderous creature was called Zeta. The captain ordered her to grab the enemy, but did not listen. The demon explained that there was no thunder, so the person here is powerless. The speed of the thunder dragon is estimated at 10,000 units. This thought was the last that somehow comforted a person. There was a strange handle in his hand. He pressed the red button on this pen, causing pain to the animal again. So he tried to force her to flee together, otherwise threatened to blow. But if Zeta did not try to resist, her body was burning with fire. It caused so much pain that tears rolled out of his eyes. Paying attention to his suffering, his friend himself felt pain. He was scared of his dragon and realized that he had really placed a bomb inside him. The one who made it was a monster. It was clear that protesting in such a situation is not the best idea. Therefore, the winged lowered the neck when the captain ran to his side to pick him up and fly away together. As they flew, the substituent stretched his hand in the same direction. They just forgot about him and left on a hostile land. The man in the role of the rider was in a hurry to get away and promised to himself that he would never return to this clan of scum again. But at least he managed to get an item. The demons that remained on the ground were simply watched as he was taken away. The legislator commented that General Gan had about the same speed. The red looked in the back of a friend. He asked what he thinks, and he just looked as his old friend moves away, taking away the enemy from whom he could not get rid of. Inside played all the negative emotions together, but he could do nothing that could harm an innocent animal. The question he heard was right. Would they have to let them go? The shoulders and the head dropped down. Nothing but letting go, in fact, did not do and could. From these reflections, he was pulled out by a familiar voice who repeated that he believed to him, that there is no reason to worry. It was Zeta's voice. Winged asked if his friend remembers the game they had played together before. At this point, the soldier was dropped from his neck, and then he he found himself in the mouth of the one who was blacking so much time with a bomb. Sharp teeth pierced his body. He caught fire with a bright yellow fire, firmly squeezing his new sacrifice with jaws. Wanted to continue to play. For the last time, they just stopped in the queue of the demon. Growing the maximum speed, the dragon, like a bird, began to fall down. To where the blonde was already waiting, holding the sword on his shoulder. He took such a pose as if they were going to play something like baseball. But just watching him as killed, Sin was not going. Therefore, he took out a button that just warned that self-destruction was activated. With anger, the psychopath warned that then the beast did not blame anyone, because soon it will blow up. The blast process was approaching at incredible speed. In a few seconds of 70, 5% reached 90. It was when the dragon was closest to his old friend that progress came to 90, 7%. And then a spider, which served as a prison and explosive for a powerful creature, began to crumble into parts like a puzzle that was cut. In a moment, the head of the dragon came out of the explosion, which accurately sounded. Between his teeth, he kept some pink thread that resembled a leash for someone. Being in the same shock that had been lasting all this fight for a long time, the company did not find what to say. They only remained silent and waited for what would happen. The only thing that the substitute was worried about his captain and could not believe that he had exploded. He urgently needed to find out if everything was fine with him. He was really alive, but his body was so damaged that everything he asked for the demons was to let him go. Under the abdominal body, everything was in the blood. While the traitor in despair and shouting asked why the guy would not die, he answered without any emotion on his face. What had to think before? It was not necessary to betray. The forces left the soldier's body faster. He could barely hold the blue eyes on the enemy's face. He could not understand what kind of betrayal. Unanswered this question, Gan just lifted the sword up and reminded the name Wenhuan. His eyes narrowed. He looked at his friend with hatred and cruelty. Do not forget to ask him for forgiveness for that night. Then in the eyes of such a bold and indifferent tyrant of madness went into true horror. The understanding of his leader has finally come. The blade of stolen weapons once after the captain's skin in different places. And the cold voice listed his sins. A coup and a rebellion, murder of comrades, abuse. Soon the body was looked as if it were many parts of the puzzle that had not yet been disassembled. But Eshe Anger was not exhausted. He continued to apply wounds. The enemy selected his weapon, its tsita. The traitor was a cruel man, ruthless. The demon was convinced that such a freak did not deserve life. He was not sorry for him. For a moment, only the sharp, frightening voice of the former leader of 511th remained on the battlefield. He promised that the sinner was waiting for the death. In every piece of puzzle on the skin of the skin seemed to show the actions that he broke the lives of other people. From childhood. These pieces were skillfully cut, like garbage that need to be lost, but Sin's did not end. It was far from the end. Bao Li's body trembled in a panic while he looked into the back of the general. There is no doubt. This demon is their captain. He also glowed with his sword and his winged friend. He was known for never escaping. After the death of the traitor, the system sent a message that the story was changed. The demon also received 2,200,000 points and received the 4th rank. The level rose to 16. In that part of the world, the status of the general also rose. But in his world, he still remained only a body. Without clothes, with his hands crossed on his chest and with a black bracelet, he was in some liquid. He was watched by the same girl. The princess pressed her palm into the glass and promised that the equipment, the dragon, the weapon would return to him, just like his fiancée. The grey man sat by the river and fishing when a soldier approached him and reported that 511th units of the 21st Army were destroyed, and General Sin Bao. In order to soften the situation, the warrior reported that he sacrificed himself. Sin-chan was waiting for the fish, the father of the deceased. The man wondered if there was a corpse, but the body was not turned. Starry ordered to prepare an empty coffin. He wanted the whole world to know that his son had died heroically on the battlefield. And from afar, by how 2 men tried to pull the fish, another character watched. His hand was littered with jewelry and scars, and all trembled. It was the younger brother of the deceased, Sin Lin. Not only his hands, but in general, the whole body was shaded. The eyes shone green. He promised to break all the guilty. Meanwhile, there were two people in the Fungo castle. One sat on the throne, and the other leaned before the stairs. He reported that the letter for the alliance conference would come in 3 days. The owner had to decide. Dao Maidan, the ruler of the demon clan, who had to choose the right candidate, thought that the conference was more reminiscent of public remorse. But it was impossible to refuse. He replied that the state should not give out the demons a plus rank because they were too valuable. And at the same time, the path is too dangerous there. Not everyone can return from there. But these reflections were completely unnecessary to the guest. He allegedly respected His Majesty and returned to the same question. Did he decide? The ruler asked him to give him 2 more days. But suddenly the guest turned into a monster and promised to help make the right decision. The demon cried. Meanwhile, Yungo also arrived in the alliance. While the princess was sitting on her throne, one of the maids took the role. She did not expect Yungo to survive so much in just a few days. Yungo sent their support. The tired face of the princess was covered with patch. She thanked. Then the guest continued. Asked the Lord to rest and answer as soon as possible about the conference participants. Of course, it was the most grandful event of clan demons, but lately they had other things. The locals actively engaged in the rebuilding of the cities, did it with their own hands. Although some magical helped them, it was present. Little green hands pushed red energy. Thanks to this, it was possible to accelerate the process from time to time. The wreckage on all sides was invested on their own places and homes. However, the little Tian Xiao has been a lot of energy. He was still young and magic took a lot of strength. One of the employees called him unexpectedly. He suggested that the child rest for a little because he was still sought by Xian General. The demon, who sacrificed to his last body during the battle, now moved on a stroller. But it was all interrupted. He said he didn't expect some things. For example, that when recovery, he will be assisted by such a young worker. The boy bowed and thanked in response to the fact that the general transplanted his second heart of his mother. The general replied that it stopped fighting in his body through an explosion. But it was very useful for the woman. In addition, he was obliged to a brave. Both good and bad representatives occur among humanity. In general, the same has always happened among the demons. It did not depend on the race. Those who do evil get punishment. For example, the deputy captain of the human army, who after the battle pleaded with him released and promised to even close to the clan. But it did not justify him or save him, so he lived alive for dogs in the forest where his body was thrown away. But those who do good have to receive the reward. Such a credo was in the general's clan, but his brother violated this rule until he was alive. Therefore, the demon was not sorry because of his death, even despite this phrase, which so easily flew into the air. From time to time, he still worried pictures from the past when he saw the headless body of the person with whom he grew. But after he listened, the baby assured the general that his brother was a horrible demon. But there was something else. When people attacked them, his younger brother did not worry their own health, although he remained in his repertoire. Of course, he called a small pair, but at the same time carried his mother on his shoulders, pulled the guy behind him. And when he met Sin, the leader who was mocking every demon he met, he had to let them go. In the box that the demon held was his heart, so she was handed over to a woman with her son. They themselves were ordered to run away. At the same time, General's younger brother left one with a monster because he realized that only in this way he would be able to save his family and help them to escape for a safe distance. So this representative of the clan was actually ready to die for the sake of mother and baby. What did he do? The story that the general heard from his little assistant struck the heart. His cheeks began to flow bitter tears when he realized that he tried not to mourn his brother all this time because he thought he deserved death and did not deserve pity. The image of the brother appeared before the eyes of the elder, and he turned to him. He did not understand these actions, never understood. And the younger remained as he was in his childhood. The dragon sat on top of the castle and kept on his head an old friend. Behind was the general and told something important. A magical element is the most important source of energy to protect the country. In the last 200 years of existence, Yungo has not come up with nothing more. Gan was currently the most powerful demon, hope of the clan. Therefore, a blue cube of energy was extended. According to the only vowel decision of the three great generals of demons, this thing can only be given to General Gan. There have been enough advantages in this. The cube can increase the demon to S rank, and it will help to gain extremely powerful skills. The protagonist listened carefully to the recommendations and asked the old man to preserve this thing, or spend an item on Yungo recovery. After that, he turned back with a slight smile and reported that he was still going to leave the city and clan. The reaction of the general, of course, was more than emotional. He was indignant and protested, but Leo only rolled his eyes. He realized that if everything continued in the same spirit, then no one would kill him, and he needed to return to people as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would suffer from such changes. And he had no idea how Nana feels now. It belongs to the human race, and all these creatures that became friends during this time, to the demonic. It was perfectly clear that they should not have anything to do, no matter how much they have experienced together. Gan Leo wanted to become a man after his death, and demons will not be able to help him in any way. The dragon nearby, who heard all these thoughts, answered to his friend, assured that you should not worry because Princess Hayao was safe. The blonde turned his head to his found friend. He promised to stay with him. It was already made. In fact, the guy didn't even think, just agreed with a smile. After all, the winged was the only one who was somehow connected with his previous true life. So now they needed to decide where they would go further. He asked about it because he was ready to fly anywhere. For the next minute, the legislator, who was left alone on a hill, shouted after the general because he did not understand where he went. The red leg was completely broken and a metal stick that fixed the bones was fixed on the side. Hands corrected bandages. The red sat next to his father in one of the hospital wards and just remained silent, looking at himself. A strong hand lay on the side, red, but it was metal. It was a prosthesis. The guy asked when they deliver the second. The senior general was lying on his bed with an oxygen mask, through which he calmly stated the fact that this issue sounds from the demon today. It was difficult to understand why he was interested in it. But since the answer did not sound in the room, the man wondered what about him. But Utsin did not want to raise this topic. He asked Daddy to rest and he threw the hood on his head and climbed out of bed. Careful steps, leaning on the stick, went away. He thought that since the first time the blonde first saw the demonic world changed. Every time he was at risk, defended others, and made any safety bypass the demons and instead got into it. It was worth understanding for a long time. He is not a demon. This thought went into the brain of Blue, eyed and did not rest. Inside, a rage, which was perfectly reflected on the face so that anyone could notice it. Unfortunately, Gan Leo is a dead man. Although they stood their back to their back more than once, though they were in one team, it did not change something between them. In the forest, the true Lord of Demons asked the systems of how to become a person. His dragon noticed that how many times this question did not sound. The answer is always the same. Goldenok was perfectly aware of it. In addition, he added that he has too high the ability to recover. This further complicated the possibility of degeneration. If he was able to find another master of the demon's S rank, then it may have solved his problem and allowed to die. But earlier he saw with the Lord only in the tower. It was one time. Friends sat on the mountain and stared at the canyon. Both tried to come up with a demon to die. The winged friend noted that of course he would be glad. But he is a contractual creature. Therefore, it seems a little strange to help him come up with how to die. A little higher, above them, a giant piece of rock was peeling off and about threatened to fall on the company. But it turned out to be a minimal threat, because immediately all large pieces of stone dragon destroyed and grabbed his teeth. Holding stones in her mouth, the creature tried not to look in the eyes of a demon, which she promised to help with death. He began to justify that he just wanted to save the demon from danger. But he was not happy. He explained the companion that you need to hold yourself in your hands and not rush to protect it. Tsita said in a shame that he understood everything. As if by order, a giant bear stretched out of the woods of the forest, stretching his paw to the blonde as if he saw his future lunch in it. But the lunch did not even have time to react to how the beast once saved with firehole directly in the middle of the predator. After that, the dialogue returned to 180 degrees. The animal still apologized, but now Gan replied that all is well and not worth worrying. A pretty fire was created on the lawn on which a pretty piece of meat was fastened. Soon, only the bones remained from this. Nearby lay the rest of the bear, which served as dinner this night. A little further, twisting like a cat, lay a dragon. The demon also suggested to eat. It was necessary not to forget about feeding something. In space appeared a strip of light, which was something like a rainbow, shone in all colors from a darker side to lighter closer to the middle. This strip was a slot from another universe. The friends looked from their world and began to look as if they were looking for something. The demon viewed its disassembled sword, each of its element, and explained that they should go to the west with dawn. You need to try to find another magical tower. But his interlocutor did not fully understand the purpose of this hike. After all, even if there is a magical tower in the west, it is not necessary that there will be a Lord of S rank. This fact is quite upset of Blonde. It so happens that people also live in the west. Therefore, he simply has no other choice. The dialogue was interrupted by a red blade that pressed against the shoulder of Leo. He looked at him silently, evaluating the situation. The red man reproached the friend that he left and did not even say goodbye. It was not possible. Yungo suits a festive banquet. Then why does the hero go away? Instead of answering, the partner decided to answer the question and asked why he did not celebrate with everyone. It was very angry, and so the inflammatory lieutenant, and he asked who this newcomer really came and why he came to them. The Lord paid attention to the weapon and noted for himself that the young man was angry, but definitely did not want to kill him. They stood in a rather strange position. He did not let one go and continued to be overwhelmed by the questions. How was the hero connected with people? Why does he know so much? The cry continued. It listed human weapons and even a dragon. But the general turned, grabbed the blade with his hand, and cut off all the short phrase. He is a man. In order to reduce the emotionality of the dialogue a little, he immediately added that, unfortunately, it will not work. The offended friend pulled his hand along with his blade and hid him when he heard that he would actually die. He came to his understanding, but he did not want to believe it. Did the young man try to die all this time? Not save him? And when he saved his father? And in the dungeon, he grabbed his former friend and remembered that he did not escape even during the battle with people. It turns out that he was just going to die all this time. But why and why? The interlocutor did not even go to break. He just explained that if he dies, he would be able to become a person again. From the very beginning, he was from the race of people, and then through the mistake, he got into the body of the demon. He has to die in order to return to his previous state. Then Rudy was interested in why, in this case, he killed his co-folders. After all, they could kill him. He could not save anyone. He could just wait for all the demons to go down and then come to the exact death. Why didn't he do it? People could win. He could come back. But for some reason, he helped the demon clan. The yellow-eyed explained that everything is much more complicated. The case was also in principles. He could not endure when someone did evil, and continues to do it. Such an answer did not satisfy the listener. The young man slowly released the neck of the other and went a few steps back. The human race invaded their territory, which is why demons lost their lives. And it was the human race that killed his mother. He hated all the demons. They all had to die in his opinion, and the true master of the demons, who was actually man as well,